Been at a work session before. Our procedures are a little more informal. We do not make formal decisions except to give direction to staff at work session. It's mostly to have open discussion. There should be a copy of our agenda on the back cart there for anybody who is interested. We have 4 items on our agenda tonight. First, our COVID update. Second, Stillwater Building discussion. Third, the trees project for the eBird. And fourth, the marijuana regulation update. We'll have public comment after each one of those. So if you're interested in commenting on one of those, just wait and we'll open up for public comment. And then at the very end, we'll have public comment on anything else that wasn't on our agenda. So with that, we'll go ahead and begin. Chris Kukulski, our city administrator, is in Helena with other city administrators. Is that correct, Kevin?
That is correct, yes. He's meeting with a bunch of city managers from throughout the state, and then they're going to attend virtually some of the ICMA, the International City Managers Association conference up there for the next 2.5 days.
Thank you, Kevin. And I want to just give an update to the council on a matter that I mentioned to the council a meeting or two ago, and that is the possibility of getting $2 million of state ARPA dollars for a law enforcement surge in Billings. We did have a meeting last week. Kevin Ifland, Chris Kukulski, Gina Dahl, Andy Zeller, other city representatives, and then also the Attorney General, representatives of the DCI, Division of Criminal Investigation for the state, Kurt Almy, then Budget Director, his replacement, Senator Ostman, and others. And that project is moving forward. It is on a bit of a tight time frame because that legislative commission meets on October 27th to make that decision, and we need to have a formal request to them or approval by the city council. And so I'll turn it over to Kevin to comment, but my understanding is staff will be preparing that. Our role would be to provide $1 million of match money along with the county, and the city is working on where those dollars would go. The state money would go to helping to solve the public defender backlog that is keeping people in our jail. About $1 million of that $2 million, and then another $1 million would go toward state law enforcement based here in Billings for narcotics investigation and other major crimes. So Kevin, do you want to comment any further on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, the meeting, very productive meeting, meeting with the Attorney General and stuff, and something that's really I've never been involved in since I've been here, where the state's wanting to throw some resources specifically towards Billings up to $2 million. So great partnership that we feel can happen here and kind of fill some of the gaps that we're needing here in Billings in the public safety arena, as far as specifically on the police side of things. Like the mayor suggested, you know, it's going to be filling some gaps with some of the major crimes investigations, along with the narcotics investigations here. And it's certainly a way, if council chooses, that we can leverage, you know, $1 million of the city money, whether that's, you know, through ARPA money or whatever that might be, against, you know, $2 million from the state and $1 million with the county to start addressing some of these other issues that we need to deal with.
Does anybody have any questions on that topic before we go to item 1? Councilmember Ewalt.
Thank you, Mayor. Is any of this money going to be spent to help relieve some of the pressure on the city with all these pre-releases and parolees that we're getting, that we're way above anybody else in the state and we have to burden all the costs?
So, Councilmember Ewalt, that was specifically talked about in that meeting with the Department of Justice there. And so, yes, you know, I don't know if specific dollars will go towards that, but that was discussed on how we can start reducing, you know, our amount of people that we are accepting here. And we did have a meeting trying to think like earlier in the week or even possibly the week before with some community members and legislatures on that same issue that we're going to, you know, working on and dealing with. So specific dollars, I don't know if there's any specific dollars that will go to address that specifically on the state side, but that's certainly high on our topics of things that we need to touch and address.
Follow up, please, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Okay, and then the other problem I have with it is and I've brought this up before several times, that the city pays actually 60-some% of the general fund for the county. So if they put in $1 million and we put in $1 million, that means the city residents are putting in $1.6 million, and the rest of the county's only putting in $0.4 million. That's pretty unfair, I think. So I think it should be adjusted down some way to make that a little bit more equitable.
Yeah, Councilmember Ubalt, I'm not going to argue with your numbers there. You know, what I would say is that, you know, another $4 million specifically in Yellowstone County and the city of Billings to address some of these issues can certainly be a benefit, since, you know, some of those issues are specifically with jail issues, you know, and major crimes happening throughout the county and not just in Billings, but it certainly affect Billings. So either way we slice it, I mean, we could be looking at $4 million, you know, to address those problems here in the county, you know, which the city includes.
Thank you. Councilmember Puritan?
Kevin, I just heard that Billings is the only municipality in Montana that has a sexual offender program. So does that mean that we also get all of the registered sex offenders that have to go through some sort of after programs?
I know we have significant services in that area. I don't know if we're the sole ones or not. Councilmember Ronning is shaking her head yes. So she might know a little bit more about that specific area than I do. But yes, I think that's part of the issue that we were discussing, was that Billings has the services, so that's why we're getting a lot of the offenders, parolees, and probationers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese?
Mayor, you said the request needs to come from the council. Is that correct? Does that mean do we need to direct staff to actually put forward this request?
If staff were not doing that, I would say yes, but staff is already on it. So they will be bringing forward a formal letter or some sort of resolution to that effect.
Okay, thank you.
So Mayor and Council, what our plan is that the next work session in 2 weeks will bring something forward in regards to that, and with more details, hopefully, of what that entails, and then it would follow up with the next business meeting after that with, you know, what the council would like to do in regards to it.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to item number 1, our COVID-19 update with our Public Health Officer, John Felton. John, welcome to welcome to City Hall. Sort of.
Hopefully this time our technology will be better. I can hear you all just fine. Kevin, are you the host? Because I need screen sharing enabled.
And Kevin, I don't know if you have a way to turn up his volume a little bit.
John, the answer to your question is yes. I'll get you to the ability to share, which should be there now, and then I'll work on the volume issue.
Yeah, right now you're sharing, Kevin.
And I hit the wrong button.
There we go. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I'll try and talk more loudly. So what I'm going to do here is start with the national picture. This is the most recent update to the map that Brown School of Public Health at Harvard does. I'd point out a couple of things here. One is the total number of cases, well over 43 million. That's in the U.S. Those are lab confirmed cases. And sadly, we passed the mark of 700,000 deaths due to COVID. If you look at the right side of the screen, you'll see that Montana right now is 4th in the nation. Importantly, though, if you look around us, Wyoming is 2nd, North Dakota is 3rd, Idaho is 7th, and South Dakota is 17th. So obviously that our whole region is pretty significantly on fire with cases. Looking just at Montana, you can see that we have been increasing for a number of weeks. We came down a little bit last week or the week before, now we come up a little bit. So hopefully we will start to see some reduction. Locally, we just continue to go up with the occasional 1-week dip. I think part of that dip that we see last week, or the previous week, was we actually had so many cases, we couldn't get them all entered on each day. we would often start a day with between 150 and 200 cases from the previous day before that day's positive results started to come in. Here's where you can see what, we're running right a little bit under 20% of the state's cases, a little bit higher than our population proportion. But everyone obviously is going up. This, when you look at this on a weekly basis, you can really see where we've been. So we've been actually going up for about 9 or 10 weeks now. There that weekend in September, well, that 18th we came down just a touch, or I guess it's the week of the 25th. But if you take that 98.6 per 100,000, which is close to 160 cases a day from last week, you actually have to go all the way back here to just below our peak surge of 2020, where we were at 99. So, we're pretty close to where we were at a high level. I do know the numbers that we got today, the 149 cases, I think it was, that was really for Friday. I heard this morning that we started the morning with over 200 cases, positives that came in over the weekend, than whatever we got today. If you look at this on a monthly basis, you can really see the nature of the surge. So the total from April through July was 1,823 cases. We beat that in August by 150 cases for the month. But the concerning part is if you look at September doubled August. The second highest month of cases we've had since the pandemic began. We were just about 400 below our highest ever, which was November of last year. If you look at October looks like, oh my gosh, we're so much better. But that really is only the cases from Friday, October 1st. So the cases over the weekend will be coming in tomorrow, in the update of tomorrow. Test positivity, we've been up at a high level. This is all tests for COVID-19, so that includes surveillance testing and long-term care. If you only look at symptomatic testing, it's running about 25 to 30% of people who are tested symptomatically have COVID. So 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3 people who have these symptoms have COVID. The other 60 to 70% have a variety of other respiratory issues. We've talked a lot about concern about hospitalization. You can see our numbers there on the right side. We've been well up over 100 for a while. Levels that we haven't seen since the surge of last year. Again, this looks at it on a monthly basis, so I encourage you to not pay too much attention to October because that's only 4 days. That does include hospitalizations through the day. But if you look at September, you can see that September is our second highest number of average hospital census since the pandemic began. We had about a third of all of the hospital days in September were ICU days, so clearly people are very sick. I would also say that we lost more than a person a day to COVID during September. The number was 32 or 33, and we've already lost one in October. When we look at kids, there's a little bit of good news on the kids. If you look to the far right there, you can see it over the last month or so. We seem to have peaked and started to work our way down. We were up to around 25% of cases were school-age kids. That number is down now closer to 20-ish%. So that is a good sign. Schools are doing a good job. We have increased the proportion of kids in that 0 to 19. It was 13% for a long time. In the last couple months, it's jumped from 14 to 15 to 16%. Still, though, the bulk of our cases, still about 2/3, 64%, are in that working adult 20 to 59 population. And then this looks at variants. Basically, all of the cases that have been subtyped, and as I've told you before, that is not all cases, that's a selection basis. But virtually all of those that have been subtyped are the Delta variant. That is clearly what's circulating in Montana. If we switch to vaccination and immunity, you can see that we are making a little progress. Now about 60% of the population has either been fully vaccinated or has been had natural infection, so there's some degree of immunity. That number is probably higher than that by a little bit, because we know that it would come down a little bit because some of those vaccinated or people with natural infection are also vaccinated. That's counted, twice. But we also know there's people who had subclinical or very mild infection who are not included because they wouldn't have been tested and diagnosed. So it's probably, we're pushing up in that 60 to 70 range somewhere, maybe a little bit higher than that for total, depending on what number you like for the asymptomatic infection. When we look at fully vaccinated, we're now up to about 70,000. Or actually, a little higher than 75,000 or something like that for fully vaccinated, and we've administered about 150,000 doses of vaccine in Yellowstone County. When we look at the changes on a week-by-week basis, that blue bar tells you how many doses of vaccine were administered for that week. So you can see we've been in that 2,000 to 3,000 range for about 6 weeks now. In terms of people who are fully vaccinated, that number is running a little under 1,000, or right around 1,000 a week, adding on to that fully vaccinated number. This is last week's data because it hasn't been updated yet by the state. If you look at the map, it'll tell you that 53% of eligible Montanans and now 53% of eligible Yellowstone County residents are fully vaccinated. Again, bear in mind, eligible includes those who are 12 and older, and doesn't include the 25 to 30,000 kids under age 12 who are not eligible for vaccine. We continue to make progress. About 58% of those who are eligible for vaccine have had at least one dose, so they have some degree of immunity from vaccine. The other ones are fully vaccinated, but this is the proportion that had at least one dose. And again, you look at that 70 and up, it's 80 to 85% of that population has been fully vaccinated. When we look at the age groups, again, this is last week, so we get this vaccine data on Tuesdays. You can see when we look at that middle group there, so we have the 25 to 55, which is the bulk of that group, or count for 2/3 of our cases. We're more like about 45-ish % of that population is fully vaccinated. So they're the bulk of our cases, but not even half of those folks are fully vaccinated. I wanted to add on a couple of things here in response to some questions I've been getting. There's been a lot of questions about does the vaccine really help? Because we do hear about breakthrough cases, people getting sick, people getting hospitalized, and people dying who are fully vaccinated. So this is a report that was just issued by Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services last week. So what you can see is that of all the cases between February 7th and September 4th, February 7th is when vaccines, people are starting to be fully vaccinated in Montana. So basically 90% of the cases, 89% of the hospitalizations, and 84% of the deaths are among those who are not fully vaccinated. So clearly there are breakthrough cases, and 10% of cases, 11% of hospitalizations, and 16% of deaths are among fully vaccinated. Most of those that are fully vaccinated who end up hospitalized or dying have pretty significant underlying health matters. That could be immunosuppression due to medications or disease, things like cancer, solid organ transplants, things like that. So clearly, people who are fully vaccinated can get quite sick, but the largest proportion by far are those who are unvaccinated. This is another way of looking at that sort of same data. This is on cases per 100,000 per day on a weekly basis. So you can see until we started seeing the surge there towards the end of July, there were very, very few cases of people who are fully vaccinated who got sick. Now that rate is about 4 to 1 as they're in the surge. That's also in Delta began to predominate. And in terms of hospitalization rates, it's 3 to 4 times higher for those who are unvaccinated compared to those who are fully vaccinated. And then I've gotten some questions about trying to understand the current vaccine recommendations. So I want to go through this, particularly talking about the third dose or the booster dose. So for Johnson & Johnson, that is the one-dose vaccine. At this point, no additional doses are recommended. We think that's probably going to be likely, but the data aren't in yet. So that is being studied, but that decision can't be made until those data go to FDA and CDC. For the Pfizer product, I think it's important that we're careful in our language here. There's a difference between the third dose and the booster dose. The third dose is specifically for immune-compromised people, and that can be any time more than 4 weeks after the second dose. So for Pfizer, it's you get your first dose, 3 weeks, and you get your second dose 4 weeks later. If you're immune compromised, whether that's because of disease or because of medications, then it's recommended you get that third dose. The booster dose is a little bit different. That's more widely recommended, and you can see the population now. It also means at least 6 weeks after the 6 months after the second dose. So you can see the categories here that this is approved for. People who are 65 and older, people living in long-term care settings, because those are high-risk settings, people with underlying medical conditions, and there's quite a list. I just put a few of them here. Also, people who work in high-risk settings, that would include your first responders, healthcare workers, people working in corrections, or people working in education, and then those who live in high-risk settings, that could be group homes or correction facilities. So, again, the third dose is for immune-compromised people. The booster dose is for the broader population. For Moderna, the third dose is only recommended at this point, only authorized at this point for people who are immune-compromised. We expect that the data for a booster dose will likely support a booster dose of Moderna, but those data are not in yet. Those studies are still underway. A couple other things that I wanted to mention here. That we get a lot of questions about, what about people who are pregnant or want to become pregnant? There's very strong recommendations from the CDC, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, which is the group of subspecialty physicians who deal with very high-risk pregnancies. They all recommend COVID-19 vaccination for people who are or trying to become pregnant. And then the final one here, let's look at influenza. There's a lot of questions now as we're into influenza vaccination season. At this point, co-vaccination is recommended. So you don't need to wait between getting your influenza vaccine and your COVID vaccine. In fact, Dr. Fauci was on the other day saying you can get one in one arm and one in the other. That's fine. Get them at the same time. I think part of the confusion in this, and where people have had some confusion, is the original guidance for COVID-19 vaccine was that it shouldn't be given within 28 days of any other vaccination. That's been rescinded specifically with respect to influenza. So we are strongly recommending that people who who are not fully vaccinated for COVID get vaccinated for COVID, as well as get vaccinated for influenza. As you know, last year we had 0 confirmed cases of influenza in Montana. That's probably due largely to the mitigation measures that were in effect for COVID-19. People were masking, there was limitations on group size, there was limitations on gathering size, there were limitations on hours of occupancy and loading of buildings. Influenza is transmitted exactly the same way COVID is transmitted. So those measures would also slow down the spread of influenza. I would be surprised if we have another year with no influenza cases. Another question that's come up a lot is it possible to get influenza and COVID at the same time? The answer is yes. They're 2 different infections. That is a little bit of a nightmare scenario for us because you have 2 very significant viral infections, both attacking the respiratory system. So that can be a very difficult situation. If you want to lead people to where they can find out where vaccine is available, they can go to covid.riverstonehealth.org. That shows all of the vaccination clinics that Riverstone Health is hosting. I know the one today, October 4th at MSUB. I understand we vaccinated about 84 people there this morning. There are lots of other places, medical practices, pharmacies, that COVID-19 vaccines are available. So this is just the ones Riverstone Health is hosting. So with that, let me stop sharing. The bottom line is we are not out of our surge. We keep hoping that that will come about. If you look at around the country, most of the other surges begin to level off and decline after 6 to 8 weeks. We are about 10 weeks into ours. And as I said, we started this morning with 200 cases from over the weekend before we even got any cases from today. So we're not quite there yet, but hopefully we will be. I think when you look at those data that show, August had as many cases as the previous 4 months combined, or September did, or August did, sorry, and then September doubled August. That is really significant. We're up to levels almost at our peak from last November, and bear in mind that is with about significant some portion of the population vaccinated. So I shudder to think where we'd be if we didn't have any of the population vaccinated. If those vaccines weren't available, we would really be struggling. So with that, Mayor, I will stop and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, John, and thank you to your staff. You've been doing this a long time, longer than we would like, so we appreciate your perseverance under these large numbers with almost 4,000 cases in September. Are there questions for John? Councilmember Ronnie?
Thank you. John, I have a question on contact tracing. Is that still occurring?
In a very limited way. It really is a matter of just simply not having enough people to manage those. So we make sure that every case gets their isolation information. They also get information about what a close contact is, and they're encouraged to notify their contacts, and they encourage them to call us. Last year when we were going through our surge, we had 30 to 40 people who were doing case investigation and contact tracing. Now we're about 7 or 8. We have added more staff, and we're continuing to add staff, but we can't keep up with those high numbers. And the other thing I'd point out is some changes in Montana law from the 2021 legislature significantly impact our ability to act. So one of those is House Bill 702, which says you can't treat vaccinated and unvaccinated people differently. Quarantine recommendations are different for vaccinated and unvaccinated people. So we can't do that in Montana anymore. Therefore, we can only make recommendations as to what the CDC said. We can't tell people that's what they need to do. I think the other one that is getting a lot of attention right now is House Bill 257. And House Bill 257 essentially says that government, state, city, county, and public health cannot in any way interfere with the relationship between a business and its customer. Now that's intended to stop particularly public health or cities from doing things like mask requirements or hours of occupation or occupancy limitations or group size gathering limitations. None of those are legal in Montana at this point. I think it's a very broad law. So anything that isn't deemed as doing and interfering in that relationship arguably is not legal in Montana. I honestly don't know what that means with respect to things like if there was a restaurant safety issue. I don't think that's at all what it's intended for, but the language is very broad. So we need to get some testing of that legally to find out what that really means. But our ability to respond is very limited compared to what we were a year ago.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for John? Are there any other questions? Don't see any. So thank you, John. If you want to stick around, we'll open up for public comment. There might be something from the podium. This is your opportunity, if you're with us today, to come to the podium and give any public comment on this item number 1. Just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Is there any public comment on item number 1? Don't see any, so we're closed on that, except for Councilmember Brewald.
Thank you, Mayor. John, you still there?
Yes, sir.
Is there a reason that we don't see any statistics on people that have been infected with COVID and getting reinfected? We hear a lot about people that have been vaccinated and getting infected with COVID, and those that aren't vaccinated. But is there any Why is there no statistics on the people that have actually had COVID and if they're getting reinfected?
We do have some of that information. We know, for instance, when we get cases, they're considered breakthrough cases as well as being fully vaccinated. So it does happen, much like the breakthrough cases for fully vaccinated people. They are certainly not as common as those who are unvaccinated, but it does happen. People who have had COVID and recovered do have an immune response typically, unless they have a very impaired immune system. So it does happen. I think the other real challenge with COVID in particular is there's a very significant number of people who are infected who never show signs or symptoms and never get diagnosed. So it's really hard to know. It's basically a statistical analysis to try and figure how many people are actually been exposed.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Purington.
Thank you. John, I've heard a couple of stories, so confirm or not confirm, that no, we're not doing contact tracing so much, but yet people are being tracked, if you will, via the cell phone on GIS or GPS, that they're being tracked as to where their locations, where they are in relationship to other people once they've been tested positive for COVID. Is that true?
Yeah, we don't track anybody. Some of that may be some confusion over a system called Sarah Alert. Sarah Alert is a CDC system that allows people who have been contact traced to self-enter information so that they can be followed to determine if they become ill. We certainly don't track anybody by GPS to determine where they go.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, John, thank you very much. Again, appreciate it. We hope that your report next month is that you had 0 cases, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. So,
yeah. Even less would be better. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, that concludes item number 1. We'll move to item number 2, Stillwater Building purchase update. Kevin, I understand we have several presenters here, so I'll maybe turn it over to you to provide a little bit of an introduction.
Yes, Mayor. Jessica, I think, is going to come over and get the presentation pulled up, and you will have a few presenters tonight in regards to the Stillwater Building and the purchase and sale agreement. Thank you.
That's state of the art in Moscow, 63.
Okay, Mayor and Council, I'm just going to recap a few things about the Stillwater Building and how we've got here to this point. I'm not going to go through, all the details on this slide because we have presented this before. But this process started back in August of 2019, so over 2 years ago that we've been working on this. And it's been about 6 staff members consistently working on this, 5 council members that were on part of the negotiation team for the Stillwater Building, and a couple outside people that have been helping with this, one being on the negotiating team specifically that's provided input for this. So we've had about 13 people that have been working on this for pretty close to 2 years now in its entirety. As you can see, in December of 2019 is when we kind of selected to investigate the Stillwater Building a little bit further with that. And then I'll kind of fast forward to last Monday, the 27th of September is when we presented the purchase and sale agreement based on some further negotiations with Mr. Holden. And then we did have some I guess, technical corrections, minor edits that I think we've, gotten corrected and stuff in those documents. Quite lengthy if you saw them attached to the council packet. About 5 exhibits along with the purchase and sale agreement and then an addendum to that. So we think that we're at a point that we're ready and we've reviewed these documents to keep moving, forward with this process and bring it to full council, which we plan on doing next week, next Monday, is when it'll be on your business item on your agenda. With that, what tonight is we're going to go over a few of those same things that we've covered, maybe a little bit of new information or giving more details on some of that tonight for you. I wanted to reiterate why the Stillwater Building. Going back, from the original RFP, there was 10 items in there that we asked people to submit proposals for, and with that location being one of them in the downtown Billings core. The size of the building was the second one. As far as city offices, the Stillwater Building is a building that's large enough to meet our at least 30-year needs and more into the future beyond that. It does infill a vacant building that is in the downtown area, so we wouldn't be displacing any current, private tenants, anything like that in the building. And the cost, it's substantially less than building a new building, and then the lack of any equivalent alternatives. The RFP proposals that were submitted, this one certainly rose to the top and required further investigation with that. And I want to just kind of reiterate, outside of the RFP, we've investigated 5 different properties to see how they would stack up against the Stillwater Building. And we reported all those back to the negotiation committee and kind of saying, how do these fit in? Where do they fit in? After those, 5 other properties that we looked at, and still the staff is feeling that this is still the best recommendation that we can bring forward at this time. Some challenges with the Stillwater Building parking. There is limited underground or basement parking, some street parking. We can work on, making as many enhancements to that as we can. Employee parking right now, as we're looking at it and looking into the future of planning, if we move forward with the Stillwater Building, would include basically off-site parking and more than likely in current parking garages that the city does own. We have spoken with the owner of the Stillwater Garage, same owner as the Stillwater Building, and inquired and made some, had some meetings with him about parking and what would that look like. Still nothing, have not come to an agreement, anything like that for leasing parking spaces or anything like that. But I did want to point out that that is one of the challenges with the Stillwater Building. The other one is there's some excess square footage there that we got to deal with that requires the city and city staff to basically be landlords and deal with tenants, because our goal would be that we need that empty space that the city is not currently going to use to be occupied as soon as we can and do and have it occupied and make it a revenue generating item. This is kind of just a rehash of what I've just said, but the other proposals under the RFP did not meet the same criteria. And there were 5 other properties that we did investigate that weren't part of that RFP process. Just a high-level review on those five other properties that we looked at. It did not have the same advantages that the Stillwater Building does. And then if council does want to direct us to move forward and look at additional properties, we anticipate that that would take significant resources. We've got about $76,000 to date into doing our due diligence on the Stillwater Building, and I wouldn't anticipate any less. Based on square footage of what it would take to start really doing our due diligence on further buildings that council would want to direct us to take a look at, or if our recommendation would be to put out a new RFP to solicit some more of that. But we would anticipate significant costs for that to happen, along with the staff time that it would take to do that. And right now we're estimating that we've got around 500 hours of staff time involved in the due diligence and negotiation process for the Stillwater Building. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to City Attorney Dahl to just kind of cover the purchase and sale agreement and kind of where we're at with that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So my presentation portion of this is very short. I'm basically just here to tell you that following last week, these documents have been thoroughly reviewed. You gave us direction to go back and thoroughly review, make the changes. There were several changes that the mayor specifically had with regard to the encroachment and easement agreement. There were about four edits that were made to that agreement. There were several that were made to the agreement for the pedestrian skyway, that the mayor had some suggestions there as well. Those have, you all saw those emails last week, and then the new documents have been presented to you now. I'm certainly happy to review those specifically if you need that reminder, but those have all been made. The documents should be finalized. They're in order, and there shouldn't be any further legal issues. They're ready for your consideration next week. One thing I wanted to point out to you is that with these amendments to the addendum to the purchase and sale agreement, the due diligence and the review period ended on September 30th. So approving the agreement next week, that will be finalizing your approval to close on the property on or before October 15th. There will be no additional opportunity to object to anything in the title commitment or regarding any of the mechanical, electrical, structural, or other components, or conduct any further inspections, I suppose, other than a standard walkthrough. But the action that you take next week will formalize the decision to approve the agreement. Will authorize the mayor to sign the agreement as well as any documents necessary to close on the purchase of property. So essentially on Monday, it's a done deal. There's no further review or due diligence period. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear so you all knew. And if you have any questions, I'm here. And as is Mr. Doug James.
And I bet you we'll have questions for staff members. Why don't we hold it to the end? We'll get the whole presentation. Our questions might be answered. We can come back to individual questions and staff when the presentations are done. Jessica.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I will take it from here. Most of the slides from here on out we've seen in one form or another over the last few presentations that we've done on the Stillwater Building. So this slide just reiterates the cost per square foot at the $13.5 million price. The 213,615 square feet is the total gross square footage for that building. That's counting every square foot of that building, including underground mechanical areas, along with all the office and common areas. And if you divide that out, it's $63.20 a square foot. As we've discussed before, there are issues with the building. There are some infrastructure updates that we want to make with the building as we begin the build out. So that's the $3.5 million. And if we put that in as an upfront cost, that's where we get close to $80 a square foot. Again, that's valuing every square foot of the building the same. So I want to show a breakdown on the square footage, which we've not discussed before. So this is a new slide. So if that whole pie chart is the entire building, when we purchase it, 8% of it's finished out by the county leased area. There's 9% that's finished. Those are your elevator lobbies, bathrooms, the fourth floor conference room. There's secured parking, which the city would be using. That's 12%. And then the rest of the building is unfinished or its support areas. And that would be your mechanical areas, circulation, such as elevators, stairs, things of that nature. So after the proposed city build out, the Law and Justice Center and city offices would occupy 38% of the building. We'd still have the 8% that the county leases. 12% is the other finished areas, so that would be those additional lobbies that would be finished. We'd still have the 12% secured parking that the city would be using, and then about 30% of the building would be unfinished, and then the support areas. Again, that's mechanical rooms, boiler rooms, things like that. So after we signed the or after the mayor signed the original buy-sell back in July, that began our due diligence period. We had all these inspections done throughout the building. And these were the recommended repairs from those inspections. This is the number we talked about in August, the $7 million. Again, not all of these need to be done immediately, but they were items identified in the inspections that would need to be addressed likely at some point. A majority, I shouldn't say a majority, but a significant amount of the repairs would be addressed during build-out or prior to build-out. And that's when we look at the minimum viable repairs. And this slide has changed since the packet that you received. We wanted to present it a little more clearly, where the numbers in the first column are what we expect to invest in those infrastructure upgrades. And then the second column in red are things that would be addressed later on. And the primary way that we were making these decisions is if it's something that needed to be done as part of the build out, or if it's something that could be done later on with minimal impact to the newly built out areas. So things that are on the exterior of the building or limited to mechanical rooms that wouldn't impact the built out area where we would already have people moved into. Now talking about the asbestos, so as we saw from the reports, there is asbestos existing in the building in various locations. A majority of the asbestos is encapsulated, meaning it is somewhere where it's covered, it's not prone to being disturbed in any manner. There is a possibility that during construction, some of those areas may need to be disturbed. At this point, we don't know what that scope is because we've not moved on to the design phase yet. The $1.3 million for the full remediation is just that. That would be if we wanted to go in and remove every last piece of asbestos containing material. That is the estimated cost. When we look at what the cost in actuality would be, we have to consider the construction costs that we're already budgeting for. So for instance, if we were moving a wall that had asbestos in it, we already know that we're going to spend a certain amount of money to move that wall. There would just be an added cost to then isolate that area and fully remediate the asbestos as part of that project. And now I will turn it over to Andy to talk about the financial aspects.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. This slide up here you guys have seen before. Just wanted to kind of go through how the funding is proposed to work here on the purchase and build out. The total really hasn't changed since the last time this was presented. Some of the categories have changed. Initially, we thought we were going to spend an additional $7 million on the purchase price, but we've reduced that down. I'm sorry, 3.5 million, right? 3.5 million on the purchase price. That's been reduced down, but replaced with infrastructure upgrades that Jessica just presented. The anticipation here is that the general fund would provide the majority of the funding at $20 million. About 30% of the square footage to be built out is non-public safety and non-general fund. That's where that $3.4 million comes from. That will be public works, planning, building, and some of our internal services like IT. That's 30% of the estimated build-out cost and contingencies. Then the ARPA funds would be used to build out the law and justice portion. Again, it's the square footage percentage needed for courts, legal, and police, based upon the space study that was completed. So then we go into uses, which I think Jessica's gone through. 13.5 for the purchase price, the additional 3.5 million for infrastructure upgrades or minimum viable, what were they called? The black column there, that one, 3.5 million. And then estimated cost for architecture, build out, and then some contingency as well to arrive at 29.6 million. So the overall sources and uses hasn't changed, even though the purchase price has been reduced. And again, a reminder on where our general fund, the history on our general fund. So it's a little hard to see here, but this bar chart is the overall general fund balance at year end since 2009. The dark portion is the recommended minimum reserve, which we don't want to go below. And then the lighter green portion up top is the amount in excess. In FY21, we ended fiscal year 21 with over $32 million in fund balance. If we use 20 million of that, the 20,350,000, we would estimate it end FY22 close to our recommended minimum reserves. We'd be about $1 million over there, right around there. And then I think Jessica's going to take over from here.
All right, thank you. So in obtaining the Stillwater Building, we would obtain a tenant as well. That's Yellowstone County. They currently lease 17,395 square feet of the third floor. Based on their rent and CAM charges, we'd be collecting starting October 1st, I think is the way that the agreement is written. So through the end of 2021, we'd have just over $94,000. And then you can see the expected revenue that we'd get over the rest of their lease term, which ends in May of 2025. So looking at the potential for lease on in the remainder of the vacant space in the building, there is potential for an additional $900,000 to over $1 million in annual rent if we were able to get tenants for those spaces. So these are the current operating and maintenance costs on an annual basis. These numbers were provided by the current owner. So with a mostly vacant building, their annual operation and maintenance costs are $577,875. That does include capital costs that they set aside. With the building being fully finished, we would expect to set aside more than that. Additionally, all the other costs would go up with a fully occupied building. The owner has the leasable square footage at 129,600 net square feet. We've not verified that number, but based on that, the current expenses are $4.46 a square foot. When we compare that to the city's facilities, City Hall charges are $576,683 for this fiscal year, and we have about 42,660 net square feet in City Hall. So a fully occupied building, and that comes out to $13.52 a square foot. Looking at the Miller Building, where building, planning, community development, and code enforcement rent space, their annual rent cost is $15.77 a square foot. And then the Depot Building, where engineering and public works administration leases space, their rent is $18.59 a square foot annually. So this just gives us an idea of what the city departments that would move into the Stillwater Building, what they're currently paying per year for their facility needs, and it's close to $1 million at $979,239. So we wanted to look at what our expected operating costs would be in the Stillwater Building based on the operating costs at City Hall, based on the operating costs that the Stillwater currently has as only partially finished and occupied. We're estimating conservatively $1.75 to $2 million a year for a fully occupied building. So if the building were fully occupied, it would mean we would have tenants and we would be getting revenue from leases in that regard. And then I wanted to go over an estimated project timeline. These are very tentative at this point, but just wanted to get an idea of what the project would look like if we do close on the property next week. We have a design RFP ready to send out, so we would plan to advertise that next week, get a design team selected by December. We would complete the design, we expect by May, go out for bid for the construction contract and start construction in July or mid next year. We expect likely to have 3 phases of departments moving over. Early 2023, we'd like to have the first departments, and that would probably be the largest phase because we're going to be building out a lot of the common areas, doing those infrastructure improvements, and then getting the first departments moved over. The lease at the depot expires in July of 2023, so we would expect to move those departments over after their lease expires. And then by the end of 2023, we would have all departments that would be in the Stillwater building would be moved over. And that is the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Jessica, and the rest of the team. We'll open up for questions. If I can just ask if, because that slide deck had some new slides in it, if you could distribute those to the council by email, I'm sure everybody would appreciate that. So.
Yes, Mayor, absolutely.
Thank you. Question, I'll just start off with one. Back on the cost of operating the Stillwater building, there was one number in there, $4.60 a square foot, which obviously is not what it's going to cost. It's a tiny part of the building now that we're heating and lighting, or the current owner is. Did you say that you'd expect that to go to about $1.75 million? And what does that translate to on a per square foot basis compared to what we're paying now on average, these other facilities?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Looking at the space that we're expecting the city to occupy, it ends up being about $15 a square foot if we're deducting the county, if we're applying the county lease against our expenses.
Okay, and if we're not, does it go up?
It goes up from there. But then you also wouldn't have that space occupied, and so then you would have lower utilities and other needs from unoccupied space.
Okay, and now I'll turn it over to somebody else, but is it, it's my understanding that the money that is currently received from the county lease pays about 60% or so of the actual cost of running the building. Is that correct ballpark? And that as a result, when we take over the building and we're not occupying it ourselves, but the county's there, we're going to be in effect subsidizing, in a sense, the county's presence there, or at least it's costing us more money, significantly more money than we're getting back.
Mayor, that's correct. So when we own the building, we're obviously responsible for the whole building. And so even a vacant building still has expenses. So we would be responsible for the expenses for the remainder of the building. The county would be obviously paying for their portion. So for instance, this coming year, the lease is $390,000 approximately. And so if we look at what the expenses were at $578,000, that would be the difference. Provided our expenses in a building at in the same state would be around $580,000, and the county would be contributing the $390,000 toward that.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions for any of our staff members? Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Boyette?
So regarding the parking, right now there is no parking around the Stillwater Building because it was a federal building. So is there the option of putting parking around the building now on street?
So Mayor and Councilmember Purington, yeah, there is parking, I mean, not directly in front of the Stillwater Building, but across the street there, so there is some parking. But yeah, our goal would be to meet with the parking board and the parking division, and then determine what's the best layout for parking along those streets, and how could we optimize it, especially for short-term parking of public coming in and out on a short-term basis, and how would that look on the street?
And then one other question.
Please.
On the build-out for new tenants, is that build-out cranked into their lease cost? How would you do that?
Yeah, Councilmember Purington, Mayor and Council. So when we do a proposal to offer a lease, generally the build-out is a built-in cost. So we would say we want to recoup, we know this is how much the build-out's going to cost. We want to recoup it within a certain number of years. We have a 10-year lease, and that's how we would build the cost for what we're charging for rent, is that we would recoup that build-out cost within a certain number of years, and then have, say, a 10-year lease where they're paying, you know, a 3% escalation typically annually.
Thank you. Councilor Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just curious that how realistic is it that we can build out a major building in 2 years? We can't even get anybody to bid for the hail on some of our property now. I mean, this may take longer than two years, so I just thought I'd ask that.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Boyette. The plan schedule may be a little optimistic. Interior build-out is different. It's a totally different subset of construction than exterior, than roof, siding, or even ground-up projects. So when you're doing interior, it's mainly non-structural framing, it's sheetrock, it's paint, it's carpet, electrical and plumbing. So if we were building a ground-up building, I would say I would have no confidence in building anything that quickly. With it being an interior build-out, and with it being the size that it is, I think it's an attractive project for contractors in that it is a large project.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Councilmember Ronning?
He said you couldn't see.
Yeah, I can't.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. My questions are actually for mostly Kevin and Andy. So, and I have several questions. So I'll start with, so Kevin, where does the revenue go from the tenants? Is that going into the general fund, or where's that revenue going to go?
Well, Councilmember Purington, you know.
Ronning.
Thanks, Mayor.
It's spreading.
And Andy might be able to answer it in more detail, but basically, if we've got facilities that is running and doing the O&M on this building, then, you know, the facilities budget is where most of that would be going. If we're, you know, turning a profit, you know, and I say that kind of under my breath, I'm not sure, I guess, which account it would specifically go to, other than we need to start building some building maintenance for those major systems, you know, account. So that would be my recommendation, is where, you know, any excess would be going for a period of time until we built those, you know, capital accounts up to where they need to be.
Okay, thank you. And then how many, I'm assuming that there's going to be a master plan on this, because I've never seen parks get a dime on a park without a master plan, or the evidence facility, you know, the police evidence barn had to have a master plan. I've never seen any single thing come to city council that doesn't require a master plan first that we've approved. So I'm assuming there's going to be a master plan on this at some point?
Yeah, Councilmember Ronning, I think that's the design phase, that we would bring you that design, you know, yeah, for what is the layout, you know, who's going to be located where, even the phasing and things like that would come to council, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then my other questions are for Andy. Oh, right there. See, I was looking right over there for you, because you said you were going to sit over there. Okay, so in regard to the reserves, when you had that slide up there about the reserves, that once, if this goes through and we end up with $1 million over the minimum reserves, what happens if the public safety mill levy doesn't pass? How will we fund public safety?
Councilmember Ronning, Mayor, City Council. Currently, there is approximately about a $1.3 million funding deficit, ongoing funding deficit, I'd say. So we would need to find ways to make that up, frankly. It's not as dire as it was a year ago or 2 years ago when we had about a gap of about $5 million. So I don't have a direct answer for you other than some decisions would need to be made about finding additional budget capacity.
Okay, thank you. And then in the slide where it says sources and uses, and you had shared that the departmental build-out contribution. So the departments that get their funding out of the general fund, are they included in that departmental build-out, or is it just only departments that do not get their funding from the general fund? Because you had said that none of that funding was the general fund.
Correct. Councilmember Ronning, Mayor, City Council. That was probably poorly labeled on my part. The departmental build-out contribution are non-general fund, non-public safety departments.
Okay. So like Public Works, the airport,
it'll be ones who are located there, so not airport. But I believe in the space study, the ones identified is going to be Public Works, admin and engineering, IT, building, planning, community development.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there's one or two other ones that I'm just not.
Okay, that's fine. I get it now. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I had the bad mic, I guess, today. Anyway. Thank you. Mr. Zeller, I have a question for you. Thank you. Sorry. Sort of the Keystone Cops over here. Sorry. But anyway, thank you. My question is, if we take our reserve, excess reserve down, will we have any impact on our bond rating or any of the financial ratings that the city has and its overall financial health? Would that have any impact for us to make that large of an investment out of our reserves on that larger picture? Thank you.
Mayor, Council, Councilmember Joy, I suspect it may have an impact on our bond rating. I can't say for certain, just in the same way that, if I were to ask you, if you took a loan out for a car, what impact will it have on your credit? It'll probably lower it, but to what degree, I don't know. Our rating agencies do reach out on an annual basis for an update. Usually it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, I've been giving them a history here, and it's showing, hey, fund balance is going up. They don't really ask questions. If they see it drop like that, it'll just require some explanation saying, hey, we invested in a new capital or building with some one-time funding. So I think it'll just require some explanation on our part as to why it went down and that it's not expected to be long-term.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to follow up on a question you asked Jessica regarding the estimated O&M budgets. I think you said it was going to cost to operate 1.75 to 2 million, if I understand that correctly. And and I did the math, Mayor, that the 1.75 to 2 million. Actually, Frank helped me with the math on the 2 million. But anyway, is now if I understand correctly, you're saying the operating expenses are going to drop to $1.18 a square to $9.38 a square, so $8 to $9 a square is what our operating expenses will drop to. Is that what you're indicating? Because, just to follow up, because it remind everyone that the city hall is at 1352 a square, Miller Building 1575, Depot at 1859. I don't know what the county pays right now, but you know, those are all higher than the 1.75 to 2 divided by the total square footage, the 819 to 938. So I'm assuming that's the cost that it's going to be.
So Councilmember Neese, when we look at the total operating costs, we would need to divide it by, did you divide it by the net square footage or the leasable square footage?
Just the total square footage of the building.
Of 213,000.
13, correct.
So the other numbers that we're looking at are net. So City Hall charges, the net square footage for City Hall is 42,000. So that's the space that the departments actually rent from facilities. So it doesn't count that, the other support areas, boiler rooms, mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, things like that. So we would have to look at the net square footage to come up with an equitable price per square foot.
Someone has to pay for the electrical rooms and the maintenance rooms and things like that, so it has to be within, somewhere in the calculation, the per square footage, must be calculated what they're charging, because it's not free to, even though a lot of people use the electrical room, all those departments have to pay for it. So I'm assuming that when you say the net amount, the 1352 for the city, all that's divided up amongst the different departments, and that's the total amount.
Correct.
Whether you call it gross or not. And we have the total building costs, or total building square foot, and if I understand you're saying it correctly, maybe I'm wrong on this, is it going to be $2 million at the high end for the operating costs, or is it going to be more than that?
Councilmember Neese, that's correct. The 2 million we're estimating at the high end with a fully occupied building. So then the cost would be, if we use the net square footage of 129,600 that the current owner has, we can do that, 1543. So that was the number when I had told the mayor it was about $15 a square foot for operating costs.
So we're going to go up from $13.52 to about $15, and what was the change? 43.
That's correct. So we do expect the operating costs at the new facility to be more than at City Hall currently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Boyette?
Can I just follow up with Andy? That one chart, you're anticipating that we're going to build out by 20...
This one?
Yeah, we're not going to pay all the money by 2022.
Correct. Mayor, Councilmember Boyette, it is a little misleading. Don't necessarily think of this as cash, but the assumption was that we entered into a contract for build out and purchase. And so while we may have the money in the bank, we would have encumbered it for this project.
Okay, I mean, it just looks, that looks deceiving to me, where maybe we should have had a 2023 there and then split the money between 2022 and 23 for the build out. So it wouldn't look so small, the reserves.
Sure. And I think what you would see, though, if we did that, is that we would have ended 2023 approximately where I have that 2022 adjusted amount.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Andy, Jessica, Kevin, Gina? Anybody else in the audience? Any other questions before we go to public comment? Councilmember Ebo?
Thank you, Mayor. Jessica, I just did some math on that 129,600, and out of the total 213, and I don't remember how many other feet's in it, but that comes up to about 61% of only net usable area out of the full 100%. That means we're losing 40% in that building to what?
So Councilmember Ewalt, Mayor and Council, we have 50-some thousand just in the basement secured parking, and then mechanical rooms. So there's a large boiler room, transformer room, and then we have the secured parking. So that's all counted in that 213,000 square feet. And so if we look at each floor and what the actual leasable area is above grade, we take out the mechanical rooms, the stairwells, the lobbies, the bathrooms, and that's where the leasable square footage is left over.
Follow up, please, Mayor.
Go ahead.
So you're telling me you're not counting the parking in the basement is net usage square footage?
Councilmember Ewald, that's correct. That's not part of the city office build-out consideration. There's no work that needs to be done down there to use it as secured parking. We would charge the people that use the spaces proportionally to how many spaces they have.
So I kind of figure that is net, maybe at a little lower price net, but that's if we eliminate the basement, where are people going to park? They got to find a place to do it. So that, to me, that's part of the net building, I would think, maybe at a little lower price. But if we're only getting 60% usable, 61% usable space out of that building, we're not getting much space.
So Councilmember Ewald, that would be office space or, courtrooms, conference rooms, things like that. Things that are equitable to what departments are using for their day-to-day operations. So that's why we didn't include secured parking in there, just because it's an entirely different use when we're looking at office space.
One more follow-up, please.
Go ahead.
And isn't the requirement for the city right around 100,000 square feet that what we're looking for?
That's correct.
Pardon?
Yes. That's
Yeah,
correct.
and so we only got 29,000 extra square feet by buying that building?
So Councilmember Ewald, the 100,000 square feet that we have from the space study, that's based on gross square footage. So that's including all those support areas, mechanical areas, circulation, lobbies, bathrooms, things like that. That number was based on the space study that CTA did, saying if you built a new building, right, that's going to contain all of that infrastructure, that's the gross square footage that you would need.
All right, thank you.
And just to clarify, my understanding from conversation you and I had earlier today is that our current net square footage being used is about 68,000 square feet, right? And that doesn't include a lot of needs that we would still have, but that's about what we're occupying downtown now, is about 68,000. Is that correct? Just to kind of help people have a feel? Or 66,
Mayor,
68, something like that?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So the 68,000 is actually a gross square footage, and it's what the departments that would move to the Stillwater Building, it's what they're currently using in all of their varied facilities. City Hall right now is about 42,000 square feet net area. So that's when we're comparing leasable area to leasable area.
Okay, so now the city occupies about 68,000 downtown gross.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm continuing on that same line of that I had before about the increase in cost for the square foot. So it's almost $2 a square more. And so I think you said our current city hall is $42,660. So that difference is almost $600,000 in additional budget expenses that we're going to have for leasing the space. How where you have a budget shortfall now, where's that going to be coming from? As far as every year we're going to have a higher cost of rent or cost of services for each of these departments. And then in addition, I just want to ask, where is the Parks Department? What is their, I didn't see anything here about the Parks Department. I think they're over at the community center now. I don't know if they charge themselves rent over there or not, but what is their cost and how much more is that going to add to that department, or is that already figured into all these costs?
So Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council. So on this slide, we're showing what the City Hall departments currently pay every year, or based on this fiscal year, for facilities charges. And then the second line is the city leases elsewhere, so Miller Building and the Depot. Then we added in the county lease, since that will be income that the city will be getting toward operating costs. And that's the $1,369,107. So as we talked about, we're expecting $1.75 to $2 million for a fully occupied building operating costs. If the building's not fully leased, it's not fully occupied, we expect lower operating costs, but we would expect another $200,000 to $250,000 conservatively that would have to be charged to departments to make up that difference. Now, I don't know if you want to talk about parks.
So, Councilmember Neese, yeah, the space study included Parks Administration moving over there, which is, on the scheme of things, minimal. I'm just looking at the charts now, right around, 3,000 square feet, give or take, and then depending on how far out you want to project that. So, yes, I mean, right now we're looking at Parks Department admin moving over there. That certainly could change based on, how design space needs, how it goes over at the Stillwater Building if we move forward. As far as increased costs, yes, we're going to have increased costs. Number one, while we're still in this building here and then owning the Stillwater Building, there's going to be some additional costs, especially in the first few years of having these two buildings. Will the department's budgets have to compensate for that? Yeah, I mean, that's part of the budget process that we're going to have to deal with, because as we add more people, we got to have more space. There's more costs that we're going to deal with, on those ends, and especially at the beginning when we're operating two buildings at the same time.
Well, and I don't disagree with that. There's going to be some as we expand, but for the same amount of space, we're adding, and yes, if you take the county lease into effect, then we're netting, again, the Miller building and the depot building, those are all non-general funds. I'm trying to focus on what's going to happen to the general budget where we tend to be short the most. We're going to be at least 200,000 then just with the county lease. We already know the county is going to be leaving. So unless we lease that building, we're adding a significant amount to our budget amount to operate this building that we may or may not ever fill. So I'm a little concerned that we don't have some type of budget projections of where this is going to take. As Councilmember Rowning pointed out, we're already getting skinny on the budget by just buying the building. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other, so on the parks issue, the 3,000 feet for Parks Administration, is that about what's in the community center now, or just a portion of that, or basically everything that's in the community center comes over to Stillwater, or just part of that?
Just the administration side, so a lot of the, rec office space and stuff, I mean, part of that would come, right now they're at about 3,000 department gross square footage, and I think the projections going out to 2030, we're looking at somewhere around 4,000 square feet is what that projection is. So if Parks Administration moves over, yes, they'd be adding about 1,000 square feet based on those projections.
Okay, and that's basically everything that's at the community center. So we'd have a not vacant, but freed up space in the community center.
There'd be some freed up space, but we've got the senior, portion rec programs, things like that are happening there that it could open up space for, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ronning, did you?
Thank you. So Kevin, you may or may not be able to answer this, but I don't think that there's Joe Holden has been very honest and forthcoming to say that he doesn't have a long line of people who are willing to step up and buy the building. Is there any possible way that he would be willing to wait until after November 2nd to see if the public safety mill levy passes and to see if we're going to get any type of revenue that will be coming in from the vote on marijuana? I'm just really concerned, obviously, that City Council moves forward on this ahead of time, and then the public safety mill levy doesn't pass, and we've got a big, huge need for public safety funding. So just a question.
Yeah, and Councilmember Ronning, I don't know what Mr. Holden is thinking or how he would react negatively. I could probably say that with confidence. But like you said, we know of nobody standing in line, waiting right behind us if we reject this offer. But whether, how his reaction to that would be, I can't comment on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you. I have a question for Gina, and it may actually be for Jessica as well, but it has to do with the Sky Bridge. As many, I'm not in real favor of us having to do anything with the Sky Bridge. I think the other Sky Bridges in town, they're owned by the private property owner, and the city has nothing to do with it probably, and it's just up for just a connection. But I want Jessica to explain to the council, make sure we understand the liability we're going to get involved in by assuming the responsibility to make sure those fire suppressions, the dry fire hydrants, actually work when the need arises. Can you explain how those actually work? And then, Gina, could you kind of explain what liability the city has open if for some reason that water doesn't flow when it should? What liability the city may have on that, given this agreement?
Sure. So, Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council. So the Sky Bridge, currently owned by the owner of the Stillwater Building and the garage, that Sky Bridge is not heated, so it has a dry fire sprinkler system. In the event that a head is activated, then water is supplied from the Stillwater Building to that sprinkler head that's been activated in the event of a fire. I'm not sure on the liability side of it, what it would open up the city to in that regard, in terms of providing the water service.
Well, certainly the city would not be responsible, obviously, for maintenance or anything of the Sky Bridge. The city would certainly be responsible for properly maintaining its portion of the system that's within the Stillwater Building. So that would, obviously, that kind of liability would depend on what the cause is. You can never predict when a lawsuit's going to come, from who and with what kind of allegations, but with proper maintenance, the city would not be, like I said, would not be responsible for any of the operation or maintenance of anything on the Sky Bridge or the systems within the Sky Bridge.
Okay, thank you. A quick follow-up, Mayor?
Yeah, Councilor Neese, some of that may be addressed in the Sky Bridge agreement, and I see Doug James in the audience who was involved with the negotiation of that, so if you'd like him to address that, feel free to.
No, I was happy with what Gina had. If you'd like to ask him, you're welcome to. A quick follow-up on the fire suppression. The Stillwater garage does it have a fire suppression within the garage itself?
So Councilmember Neese, the garage has standpipes in the stairwell, so that's where you can, hook on a fire hose to fight a fire. There's not an automatic sprinkler system in the garage.
Okay, so does that mean there's water in these standpipes, or are those dry?
They're dry standpipes.
So they're dry standpipes. So what happens is if a fire's in the garage, then the fire department has to turn on a valve or something to feed the water into them? Okay.
Yes.
So is there any reason why the water couldn't be piped from the water source within the Stillwater garage to supply the dry hydrants in the Sky Bridge instead of the city supplying that water?
Councilmember Neese, I don't know enough about how that system would have to be designed. There's no part of the garage that's conditioned space, so it's not heated. So trying to get water from, a water source underground up to the Sky Bridge, all through a dry system, I don't know the feasibility of that. I will say on the Stillwater Building, they've had annual inspections done on that fire suppression system. We would continue the annual inspections, and the agreement is that the owner of the Sky Bridge would pay their portion of any maintenance and operating of that system.
Okay, but they do have water to the Stillwater garage. They pay a water service to the city for their water, correct?
Correct. I believe they just have the fire service to the fire line to the garage,
okay.
Not a domestic water service.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Rewalt.
Thank you, Mayor. They don't have sprinkler systems in that garage, do they?
That's correct, they do not. They just have the dry standpipes.
Right. So what happens on that is if there's a call, then the fire department hooks up to the standpipe and pumps water while they take hoses up the stairs, and wherever the fire is, they put it out. So they don't just turn on a valve and get water flowing, because that becomes a hazard. so it's actually operated through the fire truck hooking up to the standpipe. But my question I'm kind of going on what Roy's going, as far as damage if something happened in the Sky Bridge. Which way does the floor on the Sky Bridge slope, towards the parking garage or towards the Stillwater Building?
You know, Councilmember Ewald, I am not certain on that.
So it's, if the floor slopes towards the Stillwater Building and something happened, and I know those dry systems do fail, and then you get floods, so if it's sloping toward the Stillwater Building, the water's going into the Stillwater Building under the door. And that's, I think, where Roy, Councilmember Neese, is going on damage to the Stillwater Building, so.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for any of our council or staff members? Councilmember Yakowicz.
Thank you, Your Honor and Council. You're asking great questions. Jessica, you're awesome handling all these questions, so thank you. I have a question that if you can't answer right away, and maybe it's already in the notes and I didn't see it, but let's say if we built a brand new building with the same amount of square footage, let's say buying all the land around the Gazette, do you have a rough idea how much it would cost to buy the land and to build what we're looking for? Nothing more, nothing less, just that amount.
So, Councilmember Yakowicz, Mayor and Council, so if we use the low end of our $300 a square foot for new construction, and we wanted to build approximately 100,000 square foot building, which would be meet our needs for 2030 was the projection. So we'd be right at that 30 million, and that's not including purchasing property. And then if we purchased property that had buildings on it, having to demolish those buildings or having to bring infrastructure to that property, doing any site work like that. When we had the space study done in 2019 by CTA, they had estimated in the mid-40s, mid-$40 million for a city hall that would meet our needs for 2030.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Honor.
Thank you very much. Any other questions before we go to public comment on this item? Don't see any. Thank you very much. We will open it up then for public comment from anybody in the audience who would like to comment on item number 2, the Stillwater Building update. If you would like to comment, please come to the podium. Just ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address up front. Is there any public comment on item number 2, the Stillwater Building update? Don't see any, so we'll close the public comment period. Council, this is on your agenda for final decision on the purchase and sale agreement and various attachments for Monday night, and that's where we'll go, I guess. Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Council, if there's any, things that you'd like us to come back with on Monday, please let us know at this point so we can prepare that. The staff memo, for Monday's meeting already had to be out the door by noon this afternoon, so it's going to look real similar. Nothing, real new, but we'll, listen to your input. What do you want to see? Is there any specifics you want us to try to bring back by Monday, for this agreement?
Okay, thank you very much. Was it further comment, Councilmember?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Kevin, we know we got extra space if we get the Stillwater Building, and this might be premature, but sometimes you have to start looking ahead before you go through with it. Have you talked to any other government entities that would fit in? So, like if somebody comes to Stillwater Building, they can do all their stuff in the one building. Have you looked and talked to any other government entities that would be willing to lease from there because of everything being centrally located?
So Councilmember Ewalt, Mayor and Council, yes, we have investigated that. We have made some contacts, and we do have a government agency that is interested if we do move forward with this. And I believe it's 20,000 square feet, give or take, that they would be interested in. So, the day we close, that's part of that, dropping that design RFP and then reaching out and contacting these people. And every chance we get, even at the Attorney General's meeting, they're bringing in more DCI officers, and we're asking them, well, do we need more space for them, because we might have some options. So yes, we are actively doing that, but again, we don't own the building, so we're not getting too active in doing that, but certainly putting our ears out there.
Follow up, please, Mayor.
Go ahead.
So I consider that very pertinent information, because now we got a backup plan, and we're not just sitting with a whole empty floor going, oh, how are we going to pay the bills? We're going to have to shut the lights off in half the hallways. That would probably help make the decision on whether we go forward or not with it. If you guys actually have some people that are pretty interested in joining us there, so thank you.
Councilmember Ewalt, certainly 100% agree with that. It's hard to put any definitives out there. Things change, but we're actively working, on that future plan. Every week we're meeting once a week as staff internally to develop our plans, develop phasing. What does that look like? But we really can't put our boots on the ground until we know whether we're moving forward with this or not.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Barani?
Thank you. Kevin, when you say you're actively working on a future plan, does that include how City Council and how the city's going to pay for public safety in the event the public safety mill levy doesn't pass?
So a lot of times our finance director is involved with that, because certainly, on the finance side of how that would look, without the public safety mill levy, what does that look like? What I can say is, even not adding additional employees, we still got facilities needs that we've got to deal with, whether that's, just a city attorney's office. I mean, we are removing things in, the general area of the city attorney's office just to make room for one more desk. We're at that point, so we've got to come up with some solutions, whether this mill levy passes or doesn't pass, to address our facilities needs, because we are out of room. We don't have, anywhere else to put anybody.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I would take exception that I think sexual assault and violent crime takes precedent over someone having a nice space for a desk. I agree with you that there are facility needs, but our city has really serious violent crime problems that we need to be addressing and needs to be a priority, and it's been a priority of this council. So I would take exception to that, but I agree with you.
Yeah, Councilmember Ronnie, and certainly with that, and that was part of the, the facilities was part of that. One thing that they say is hampering our law enforcement activities. So, with that, we've got to address that to move even that, what you're saying forward too. So agree.
Thank you very much. Maybe a final question for Budget Director or Finance Director Andy Zeller. Andy, the bar graph that you showed that had our reserves going down to about $1 million after full build out. Just a few clarifications. That number did not include any attribution for asbestos charges, correct? The 1.3 million. And is it correct that it did not include any money for a second tranche of ARPA dollars?
Mayor,
so how would those affect the number or the bar graph?
So Mayor and Council, correct, it did not include any anticipation of asbestos remediation. It only included the $20 million attributed as a source of funds for the purchase and build out of the building. With respect to ARPA, none of that included ARPA. The ARPA funds are held separate from the general fund in their own fund. The ARPA fund, we have received our first tranche of 7.9 million, and that is held separately from the general fund. It is not in that bar graph anywhere. That bar graph is only the general fund.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Okay, let's move on. Council, thank you very much for your very useful discussion, and to staff. Very helpful. Item number 3 is the trees project and green light project in Ebird. Our presenter tonight is the director there, Zach Tarakitis. Zach.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Mayor and Council. That's it, I hope. Great, thanks. What we're going to talk about tonight is Project Greenlight's SEPTED program. We've been working with downtown a little bit, and I'll kind of talk to you about some of the research we've done on that. History of the tree program. Currently, we have a tree and landscaping program in the Bird that was started in 2018. From 13th down to the Metra-ish in that area, there was a lot of flooding, and so infrastructure work was getting done at that time. The Bird came to council to talk about the opportunity to do some landscaping in that area to complement the infrastructure work that was being done. So $40,000 were approved. In summer of 2019, 30 trees were installed with irrigation and rock landscaping on 2nd and 3rd Avenues. Summer 2020 was kind of when I was getting my feet under me in the district and started talking to property owners about the availability of this project. Brought in 3 different landscape companies to start giving us an idea of what we wanted to accomplish there, and then also started talking to businesses about taking advantage of the tree program so we could create some connectivity between downtown and the Metro. If you stand in the middle of 2nd or 3rd, around 14th, 15th, you look one direction, we have trees, you look the other direction, we have the Metro. In between, there's not much going on, so that was kind of the intent behind this. We did have 3 property owners take advantage of it in 2021. 18 trees, irrigation installed, and again, there was some connectivity there that we're trying to put all these areas together. And then we've been transitioning a little bit with the focus in the Bird with the local efforts with public safety, Lazy KT, and recognizing that our community's really taken on a lot of the public safety and initiatives. So we wanted to support that. Project Greenlight, actually in 2020, Mayor Cole at Liberty and Vine mentioned this project as a potential solution for crime that was going on. There was a meeting there that was all of downtown talking about the challenges that were going on there. So I did a little bit more research and digging into that. And then we also created a task force per our board to talk about public safety in the area. And Project Greenlight was included as part of that. Since then, I'll talk about the outcomes and the public safety research we've done. We have labeled it Project Greenlight for our district, and I've been working with Billings PD to come up with the best practices for us to implement things that support their current efforts, not creating additional challenges for them and needs for additional infrastructure for this type of project. So the outcomes that we found with our public safety task force, which is made up of private business owners in our neighborhood, the outcomes: identify and work towards solutions to the crime centers, Lazy KT being one of those, fencing of the railroad, and establishing a green light district using this as the model. Those are the primary areas we saw. The other considerations that were researched, both prior to my time with Tim Goodrich and now during this time, was hiring private security. We've budgeted out for 2 private security guys in vehicles 24/7, what that budget would come out to. And then prior to me, a BID district similar to downtown and expanding that into our district. There's some overlap there already. Similar cost in those 2 things. Adding SEPTED training and graffiti removal just generally into the neighborhood. So what we found is the costs for those were a lot, but also that business owners were looking for solutions, and we thought this would be a pretty good opportunity to use the neighborhood that we have there, where property owners know one another. We have property owners who own large chunks of land, so they're in control of bigger portions, so they can make some changes quickly, and it would affect blocks. So the goals that we set for this by the end of 2022, 50% participation of our Bird members signing up for SEPTED evaluations. So we're working with the chamber to get more of that happening in our neighborhood. We had our first one done last week. We made it people aware of it during our annual meeting. And most folks weren't aware that SEPTED evaluations were available. Quarterly reviews of crime stats. We're already working on that and giving it out to our membership. Participants upgrade infrastructure to capture real-time data. Again, talking about what works for the police department, not creating something new where we can capture that and then pass that along as we see what's going on in the neighborhood. We've systematized management to where we can get that information coming into our office and then present it back out to our neighborhood quickly and not have to encumber that as part of our police department, so they know what's going on their block, because it does change throughout our neighborhood pretty rapidly, heading from west to east on some of the things that are going on with property damage, theft and crime, that type of crime. So, and then hopefully a decrease in these things happening by the end of 2022. So there's some of the measures we hope to accomplish with that. So the Byrd Board of Directors, what we're asking to support this is kind of shifting our priorities here a little bit. We have about $23,564 left in our tree funds, and I've been beating the streets quite a bit to get people to participate. It's just seemingly not much of a priority when we're still dealing with a lot of property theft and damage. Is that we know that we need to get more greenery down there. It'll be a huge enhancement to the area, but we're talking to property owners, we really got to rope this other stuff in because people are losing a lot of money with the theft and damage that's going on down there. So we were hoping to shift the resources over that we have available in this fund to pretty much copy what's being done downtown, a kind of a matching program using all of the SEPTED practices that DBA has been doing for quite some time. We're using all their paperwork, just transferring it over, so the application process would be the same. Coming into ours, we would have a little bit different matching than they do. I think they do 50-50 up to 3,000. We just, we don't have that resource. Plus, we also have people with a lot of existing infrastructure and cameras and lighting that they would just be upgrading. So we're not having to add a lot of new, and that's just me, again, walking and talking to neighbors about what we need there. So we're going to limit that shared expense reimbursement to 50%, focusing on cameras and lighting updates so we can start capturing real-time data and who's causing the problems in our neighborhood. We don't think it's everybody. We think it's a select few based on a lot of the just anecdotal reports we get. So that's what we're just asking for is permission and approval to get those existing dollars left. We paid everything up to date for all of our, as of last week, we got everybody paid up on their existing tree applications. So that's our request. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Kind of questions for staff, I guess. What's the mechanics? This is a work session. We don't have the power to make a decision per se. This would come back on a consent agenda item, or I assume, is that correct?
Yes, Mayor, that's the intent.
Okay. Questions now for Zach, though. Councilmember Nee, Councilmember Brewalt.
Thank you. Zach, a slide back, I think it was, you had the SEPTED and maybe two slides, with SEPTED and graffiti removal. Is that, so what you're asking for is not actually, doesn't entail graffiti removal. You're just asking to move 20,000 into the SEPTED training or the SEPTED program.
Correct.
But so that money's not going to go help graffiti removal. Is that correct or not?
It's not, but again, the DBA came over the other day to kind of show us the products that they're using. We have 3 property owners that we want to say, can we start trying some of this to see what are the best practices? We had some folks, neighbors, who came over and actually painted over some areas that we can't remove with the elephant snot as the product that takes off the graffiti. So we're not there yet. Graffiti removal is part of our plan, but we have a capacity issue in the Byrd a little bit with getting that done. But we've been working with Nate West and Sergeant Nate West about, what they have a trailer with a sprayer on it already, so how could we pick that up and go down and designate a day? Our board members, we have 2 board members who said, whatever, Tuesday morning we want to knock it out, we'll go down and spend a half a day and start on this graffiti process. So
I appreciate that, because you drive down First Avenue and there's just graffiti. Now, some of it may be out of the eBird, between there and the downtown. There's the old camera building is just terrible, and I think it's in an island there, right? It'd be great if either downtown or eBird would pick that property up so we could get something with that, because that's a real sore spot in that whole neighborhood there.
I have heard there's potential movement happening there sooner than later.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
great.
good news. We're all looking at that as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brewalt.
Thank you, Mayor. On 2 slides forward, you're asking for 20,000 remaining, and in our printout here, we got 23,500.
I hadn't called Andy at the time of making the PowerPoint and sending it in, and then because we were still paying off the last 2 applications, and I needed them to get their final bills in so I could get it to him so we had accurate numbers for tonight. So we got the last check.
So which one is it?
23,526.53, the number that's in here.
Okay, so that one's not right, this one in their printout. Okay.
Yeah, I made an estimate until we got that last receipt, and I didn't want to be inaccurate.
Thank you. Other questions for Zach? One question I guess I'd have is, Zach, in Detroit, where Project Greenlight got started and has been very successful, the buildings that have the cameras are very obvious because they have a green light. And that tells the bad guys, I'm going to mess with the place that doesn't have the green light and leave that one alone. That deterrence isn't good for the people who don't have the green light, but it sure encourages people to acquire the green light and the camera equipment. Will that be part of it? Some sort of visible identification of participating businesses?
You bet. We've priced out both the signs that say this is a Project Greenlight location, you're being surveyed, however that sign is going to be finally done. And then also, we One Source Lighting downtown has costed out some pretty inexpensive lighting for us of a variety of types to meet the needs of the neighborhood. So we're going to pencil that one out and figure it out and hopefully include that in the business side of the investment, so because it should be pretty minimal.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one more point. I'm assuming this will probably get approved by council. I think it's a good, I don't see any problem with it, but after it's approved, you know, with these programs where the council just kind of approves it and then we never see it again, it'd be nice to come back and hear some success stories as far as what it's done. I don't think we've heard anything out of the downtown on with their SEPTIP program, but I'm sure they're doing some good work with that, but it'd be nice to hear back from you.
Hopefully we'll do a nighttime tour and it'll look like Christmas down there.
Are you saying there's going to be a red light district?
We got rid of that one, I think, in the 80s.
Yeah, I thought so, but absolutely. You're going to be a pilot program for the rest of the downtown area, whether you like it or not on this. Councilmember Ewell, was there a hand down here? No. Councilmember Ewell.
Thank you, Mayor. Zach, is 13th Street Underpass part of the TIF district?
It's not part of the TIF district.
Oh, okay. I was going to give you some kudos if it was. I don't know who financed that beautiful scenery down there, but
awesome.
That is really nice. She did a really good job. So hopefully it won't get tagged, but
so far the one underneath the other underpass is, I don't think it had any damage, which, yeah, we hope so as well. It's a good project. Big Sky Economic Development, that was one of their Space Place grants.
Yeah, thank you very much. Catherine Carter has been very much involved with the development of that on 6th Avenue, and we appreciate her efforts and the Southside Task Force efforts.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll open it up for, thank you very much. We'll open up for public comment on item number 3. If anybody would like to comment on this project in Ebert, please come forward. Just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Is there any public comment on this item?
Catherine Card, 2815 4th Avenue South. Mayor and Council, I appreciate the presentation that just happened and your question, Councilman Ewert, about the North 13th Underpass. Southside Task Force received that grant from the Big Sky Economic Development for both the 6th Street Underpass and North 13th. We are interested in dealing with graffiti as well. We have used many things with the production of the grant murals. We have not touched the graffiti that's around us. And consequently, our murals haven't been touched by anyone, and we have an anti-graffiti coating on it anyway that's quite expensive, but it's been really effective. So I guess my offer is to Zach, but to you all, Southside Task Force is now that we're finished with the murals, engaged in doing graffiti cleanup, using elephant snot and whatever else we could use. And we would be very glad to coordinate with others in the city to deal with the graffiti. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on item number 3? Any other public comment, item 3? Don't see any, so we'll close the public comment period, and I guess that concludes item 3. Council at 7:23. Why don't we take a break, and we'll come back as close to 7:30 as we can and continue with our last item, the marijuana regulation update.
City Attorney Gina Dahl is going to start us off, and then Wyeth Friday is going to be kind of taking us on some more stuff. Miss Tracy is under the weather, and she is on via Zoom, and so if there are questions or something that we need to bring her in on, she is listening in, and we'll get her to help us out a little bit, so.
Gina.
Thank you. Yes, I was just going to tell you that Karen is not here tonight, and that's why you're getting a pretty abbreviated presentation. That's also because we really have all the direction that we've needed to get from council, so we are just simply in the process of drafting an ordinance for your review. I was perhaps overly optimistic, maybe naively so, that we might have at least portions of a draft to share with you tonight, but Karen's been ill for the last week and can't be in the office for the rest of this week either, so that didn't work out very well. But we should have a comprehensive draft prepared and ready for your review in about a week, or by October 15th, and that will address all the things that are mentioned in the staff memo, including the application process, any lottery requirements if caps are imposed, potentially canopy caps, the testing issue, which is more of a label confirmation than really testing. There'll be requirements to comply with building, fire codes, things of that nature, water and wastewater regulations, which are really important as well. So we'll have all that prepared and ready for you in advance of the next meeting. So really, I'm here more to just introduce Wyeth. He's going to talk about the zoning stuff, and we've got a map here for you to show you that you guys have been wanting for the last couple of weeks. So.
All right, well, thank you, Gina. I didn't know that's the big introduction. Just try to manage expectations here. So a couple things. I'll first just talk briefly to the memo and the zoning piece of this in terms of kind of a reminder update of where we are with the zoning process. So currently our city zoning commission is set to have their meeting tomorrow night over at the Miller Building in the first floor conference room, it's their normal zoning monthly meeting, and they will be reviewing they have actually two zone applications besides this, but they will be reviewing the proposed ordinance tomorrow night and conducting a public hearing. And our expectation is then making a recommendation to you to move forward with the marijuana regulations. And what they're considering is what you received, I guess it's been about a week and a half ago, that was sent out. It's on our website. It's part of the agenda for the meeting. So that's all out there. And what's outlined also again in this memo are the elements of that proposed draft regulation. So that's all set for tomorrow evening. Just to recap, I guess real briefly, it's in your memo, but the current draft ordinance is to allow dispensaries, medical and adult and combined use in 3 specific districts: heavy commercial, industrial 1 and industrial 2 in the city, require a 1,000-foot separation between all marijuana dispensaries, cultivation and manufacturing businesses from public or private schools, daycare centers, public recreation centers, parks, churches, synagogues, or other places of worship, youth centers, and then neighborhood residential zones, which I'll show you here in a minute on the map what that's doing. And the working group had talked about, and we had started with separations from all of those items except residential, and then the recommendation and direction from you was to add residential to that. So that's where we are right now with that 1,000-foot separation. It allows testing laboratories, and there's one, I noticed in the memo, one item missing here. So testing laboratories are proposed in the draft zoning to be allowed in the Downtown Support District, DX, the Central Business District, which is what's missing on this list, and then heavy commercial, light industrial, heavy industrial, the other districts as well. The ordinance clarifies that all of these different marijuana uses are not home occupations, so none of those would be allowed as home occupations, and cannot be accessory uses to primary uses unless that accessory use is located in one of the districts that we've got listed. outdoor cultivation is not allowed within the city limits for any licensed marijuana cultivation operation, and that it requires currently that if a business comes in for their sign permit, through our current sign regulations, that they first must show that they've been had review at the state level. The state is still working on, from what I understand, the sign and advertising requirements, and so we want to make sure that any business goes there first and then comes to us, because one of our concerns has been whether the state is going to end up content neutral or not, and we want to make sure we're following what is in our code regarding the zoning signage requirements for that. So that's why that's been added. And then lastly, which was brought up and is included, and again, the council provided direction to us in a couple sessions ago, was 150-foot setback from arterial streets. Again, the idea there for marijuana dispensaries specifically, and that was to try to reduce the potential for dispensaries, one after another, lining our arterials. And some of the discussion at that time came back to the concerns in the past regarding casinos and those uses, and ending up with lots of those kind of lined up in one area. So that's also in there now. So with that, unless there's any questions, I'll have Kevin help me, and we'll pull up the map, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the map that we have here, and we'll be sending this out to you. Got this wrapped up just this afternoon, and so we'll share it, of course, with everyone from now on. So this map is what we've done, and the maps you saw before had all the different separations and layers on them. And what we've done here is boiled it down to basically the areas that are in the pink are where the marijuana businesses would be allowed to operate. We've applied the 1,000-foot separation from all the uses, including residential. And we're showing you just in those, the 3 districts, the heavy commercial, industrial 1, industrial 2. So the only thing you're not seeing on here is if you had a lab and you wanted to be in like the DX support downtown, you could do that. That's not showing. This is specifically showing you with all the, where dispensaries and those uses would be available. So that's all the pink. What you'll see is that it's really tightened it down into specific areas where we have those districts, and where those separations do not cross over and take remove those properties. So you're looking at just those areas. One thing you're also seeing on here, and we'll zoom in here. If Kevin, you want to zoom to the kind of the southwest, that sort of biggest pink area, that'd be great. The other thing I want to point out is as you see in there, there's the roads kind of have an orange outline around them, and it's only some of the roads. Those are the arterials, and so that's showing basically where that 150-foot arterial setback would be. So it's not, it doesn't tell you obviously per parcel what the 150 is, but it shows you that, okay, if I'm able to have a marijuana business on 29th and Gable, and I'm on the Gable piece there with arterial, then there's a 150-foot setback from the arterial that I have to meet to. So it's basically just showing you where those arterial setbacks would apply. If I'm on one of the small side streets off of Gable, that's not an arterial, that's not going to apply. So that's just identifying for you where those locations are, where that arterial setback would be. The last thing and I guess you're seeing also on here, it highlights the existing businesses that are, the marijuana businesses that are mostly in the county. In this area, you're seeing those in the county. And then we have the one off of, when you zoom out, you can see there's the few that are in the city. The Mac mainly is the one down there off Midland. And then the Golden Valley one, which is not currently in good standing doesn't have a license or anything to be in the city. Everything else, those you'll see are in the county. The one other thing I wanted to mention, there was some question about, or been brought up about, how many parcels are we talking about within the pink area in terms of potential development or redevelopment and use for marijuana businesses. And I guess the challenge, the sort of thing to think about there is that there's quite a few parcels, but a lot of them have development on them in businesses. And so it's not that that's all available, but it's important to recognize that there is available space for a business to locate in those areas. And so when you start looking at these, Nicole Cromwell and I did a little look just with the aerial mapping today very broadly, but there's that little piece that's up north of the Bull Mountain Grill up off Main Street and Highway 87. There's a radio, or a cell phone tower up there. That's all vacant property. So there's the potential that a business could locate up there. And then when you get down to some of the areas to the center, down by Minnesota Avenue, kind of in the central part of town south of the eBird. Most of that is actually, there's a feedlot and there's Phillips 66 refinery. A lot of that's probably not, it's got businesses and obviously the refinery, that's probably not going to be a place where there's a lot of room. There might be a few pieces there, but that's less likely. But then as you go over toward Daniel and off Monad, there's certainly properties there. There's vacant properties. There's properties that could be redeveloped. There's some more older buildings in that area, warehousing and things like that. So there's definitely some potential there. And then over off of Gable as well, there's some areas also where there's some vacant lots, and then there's some places potentially for redevelopment. So I think if you look at that sort of issue, not just on, there's 100 parcels, we don't, some of them are built on, some not. But if you look at those areas, you start to see, there's areas there where a new business could build from scratch. A business could take a building and operate currently, or could do some kind of combination of redevelopment. So there's definitely, this is providing capacity and area for those businesses to locate, even though obviously it's showing a focused area in the city. So with that, be happy to answer any questions. We'll be sharing this map also, aside from this evening, and to you, to the Zoning Commission tomorrow night, and make it available for anyone who would like to look at it. We still have all those other maps with the layers, but it does get very confusing. We've been working with GIS. They've been excellent to help us try to narrow some of this down, but when you start adding too many layers on top, it does get a little busy. So this was trying to just say, here it is, here's just the color that would make it possible.
Thank you, Wyatt. Has there been any discussions between you and the county, or anybody at the city associated with the county, about what they might be thinking in the way of restrictions? Or is the best guess that in Las Vegas they're betting that all of those existing locations will continue to be open for business after January 1st?
Mayor and council, we understand just today that the county is going to be discussing this at their discussion session on Thursday, and asked staff to be able to attend, reached out specifically to planning regarding the zoning piece of it. And I know the city administration's been in touch, and legal as well. So I guess the answer is yes, there's some discussion there, but we have not, this will be sort of a first discussion, at least from our standpoint. We haven't had any detailed conversation there. We have shared all the information that the city is working on.
Is that 10 a.m. Thursday? What time is that discussion?
It's at 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions? Councilor Rio, Councilor Ronning?
Thank you, Mayor. That square up there by the Bull Mountain Grill, Wyatt, can you zoom in on that, please? Okay, so you have to be 1,000 feet from a residence, or is it a residential zone? Which one is it, or is it both?
Councilman Rewalt, Mayor and Council, it's the residential zone district.
So if there's a house there, that doesn't count?
Correct. If there's a house that's not in a residential zone, then that would be different, right?
And if the house is in the county, it doesn't count?
Correct. If it's in the county, and that's important to note when you see county islands, if those county islands are, if the county was doing something different, then it wouldn't apply to those, and it wouldn't apply if it's a house in the county.
Okay, because there's, right across 87 from that pink up there, there's actually residents there, so, but they're in the county, so that's a moot issue then, right?
Correct, right. As of right now, just looking at the city requirements, yes.
Okay, and then I'm dropping back on Mayor Cole's question, the county. When you look at Ward 2, once you get across Main Street in the Bitterroot area, there's a lot of county land, but you have no idea what the county's going to let. Can they open up residential area for dispensaries?
Councilman Rewalt, Mayor and Council, there's a lot of options that they could have. Right now, what they have in place under their resolution for their regulation currently for medical marijuana doesn't have those types of broad allowances regarding residential. So, but I mean, it's possible. Like we've currently in our draft, we're saying no home occupation. That's a decision that obviously that they could make as well. So yeah, I mean, any of those areas in the county right now, it's kind of unknown.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you. To everyone that worked on this map, thank you. This helps tremendously. So looking at the map, I was kind of surprised that there wasn't any pink on up on the rims along Highway 3. Is that because of the residential properties on the south side of the rims?
Councilmember Ronning and Mayor and Council, yes, the 1,000-foot distance from, even if you're just south of Highway 3, that 1,000 feet goes so far north, and there's only a portion of that, obviously, it's in the city, so that actually ended up taking that out.
Yeah, okay. And then, as I'm looking at this map, and maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like almost every ward has an allowance except for Ward 4. So is that correct or not?
Councilmember Ronning, Mayor and Council, I actually haven't checked that yet since we got this done today, so I'm not sure, but it looks potentially like you're correct based on with that area that was, that was limited or that went out on Highway 3 from the previous.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor. Wyeth, I guess I don't know if this is a question for you or Regina, but when we talk about the 1,000-foot from residential zones, a lot of these county properties someday are going to come into the city. And so what happens is if we don't have 1,000-foot from residential zones, regardless if it's city or county, then we're just going to be creating a problem that we have to address sometime down the road. Is there any reason why we can't do the 1,000-foot from city and county to see what this map is going to look like so that we know that as county properties come into the city, we're not impacting these businesses that may just be on the line?
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council.
Not yet.
I mean, we could certainly, run the same, take the residential zoning district like separation or any of those and run it across everything, all of that. And it would certainly obviously take out a lot of the things those islands would disappear. And then it would also potentially start running into some of the other businesses that are in the county now. So yeah, you could do that, I think, and that's part of, I guess, we're hoping there may be some conversation in terms of what the county might do regarding that, because I guess one of the things that if you look at Lockwood, if you were to put 1,000-foot residential buffer in Lockwood, pretty much all those businesses that are out there along Old Hardin Road and everything would get covered. That would cover them up. So that's an issue that's going to have to be looked at. There'd be a lot more of those nonconformities happening if that was applied in some of those areas of the county than where we are right now in the city. But you could certainly show that. We've showed some, not on this map, but we showed the county at least with all this, and then and then identified all of those businesses so they could kind of see what was going on. But we haven't run it across the whole thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I had a question about the area around Daniel. That blue or that pink spot is 1,000 feet from residences. Is that correct? Does that include Ponderosa Acres? But I might be a little bit wrong in my memory in terms of where Ponderosa Acres is and that residential area.
Councilmember Joy and Mayor and Council, I'd have to double check. I mean, that is showing the 1,000 feet from residential and then all the other schools, parks with playgrounds, churches. It's grabbing everything there. But we could check that. I'm not sure is that a residential facility that you're talking about?
Yes, okay. But I'm wrong. Your map is correct. My memory is wrong as to where the Ponderosa Acres. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure where that was.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Purington?
So I just wanted to follow up a little bit. regarding the county, because I think it was almost a month ago, in having a conversation with a couple of the commissioners, they said, well, let us know what you're doing. And at that point, as Gina alluded to, we really haven't had anything definite. We're still working on it. So there was really nothing to be sent. And they said, well, they would like to see it before it goes to a full meeting. So I don't know, have you sent anything to the commissioners to show even the map, let alone, what the possibilities are in the past few meetings that we've had that we said, we want this, we want this. Have you sent anything to them yet?
Councilmember Purinton and Mayor and Council, and I'll let Gina. I know Gina's been in contact also with county legal and all. City Administrator Chris Kukulski did share a bunch of our maps with the commissioners several weeks ago, when we had all the different layers and such on those maps. I know staff very recently, I know Nicole has shared the draft code also with some of the county staff. But we haven't had any kind of formal sit down or anything discussion until, like I said, I think this Thursday that I'm aware of, and I don't know if Gina can share more.
No, actually, I haven't either. I did reach out to the county attorney at the end of August, asking to kind of collaborate on this issue and offering to share our information and asking if they would share their information if they were doing it. I asked them a lot of questions, but just frankly, I just didn't get a response. So I didn't know what that meant. If they weren't going to do anything, or if he just got busy and missed my email.
Thank you. Any other questions before we open up for public comment? Councilmember Denise.
Thank you, Mayor. Like, you have a city county planning department. So are you developing a map for the county right now at all, like this?
Councilmember Denise, Mayor and Council, not anything that they've said, go do this map or do that map. We've run, like I said, we've done these, we've identified all the businesses also out in the county, and then showed with all the different layers what the separations are, what the city's looking at, but we haven't had any direction to say we want to run a certain kind of map for Lockwood or something like that. They haven't given us any direction there. Certainly if they were to, and we've had some of these, again, sort of staff discussions, that if they were to move forward with something that was going to be county zoning related, then the county zoning commission and, that whole thing would have to start up just like what you're doing here with city zoning commission, and something potentially could move through. Their current regulation right now of medical marijuana wasn't through zoning. They did a different type of, because it was countywide. So, but that doesn't mean they couldn't do something new. But we haven't had anything where we've been asked to specifically run or do something just county only.
Well, so quick follow-up. If you do get some information requests, or you start producing some stuff for the county, I sure would like to see it if they're willing to share it, so I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Wyeth, along those lines a little bit, if at the Thursday discussion session for the county commissioners, they look at you and say, Mr. Friday, you're wise. You've been looking at all this for several months. You are our planning director. What would you recommend that we do? How will you answer that question?
Well, Mayor and Council, it's, like I said, the situation in the county right now is very different because of the number of existing businesses under the medical marijuana allowance. And of course, those potentially could apply if they're in good standing and be licensed for the adult use as well. So I think one of the things I would say that we would have to look at and they would have to give direction on is what kind of, are they comfortable with some kind of nonconformity situation occurring going forward or not. I think that's going to be pretty significant given those areas. Like I said, in Lockwood, the proximity to residential, if you did as big a separation as the city's contemplating, that would be significant. So I think that'd be a big question is where do we go with that in the county if you're looking at something like that? The district issue, I mean, there's actually quite a few of those are in commercial or industrial type districts. So that's not as different as what the city's contemplating. But those separations would be a challenge that would have to, or something that would have to be considered, and they would have to decide kind of what type of scenarios they wanted to run there. And so that's why I guess we would kind of need to look at first because of those existing businesses.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Purington?
That just made me wonder with the number of businesses that are already up there in Lockwood, what is the separation? I know you said 150-foot setback on arterials, but how far apart are they from each other?
Councilmember Purington and Mayor and Council, currently there's no, we haven't done any measuring of separation between each of those businesses. So I don't know how far apart they are as they're kind of in that area of Lockwood. We don't have that information.
Do we, and we haven't really addressed that either, I don't believe, in our regulations, have we?
Councilmember Purington and Mayor and Council, no, there hasn't been any direction to look at how close two different marijuana businesses could be to each other. Just that the 150-foot separation or setback from arterials to prevent that kind of corridor type of thing, feel happening, but not in terms of how close one could be to another.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for Wyeth? Gina?
I just wanted to mention, I think that issue did come up briefly during the committee meeting, and it was essentially determined that we didn't believe that that was going to be necessary. Also, it's probably, if council does decide to impose a cap, it probably wouldn't be necessary either to impose, to require separation distance between businesses.
Okay, thank you. I guess that does beg the question whether in the last week or two there's been any further developments in the mind of staff on some of the business regulation issues. Things like the procedure for establishing a cap and deciding who gets licenses and who doesn't, how those would be renewed or not renewed. Any developments there that you want to inform us about?
Mayor and Council, I don't have anything I can add. I don't know if Gina does it. I know that the work's been continuing since you gave direction at the last work session, but I'm not aware.
Mayor and Council, I don't believe there's been any new developments. We're still just working on the directions that you previously given, and that was to establish a lottery. So we'll be setting forth, the procedures for that, which a lot of it will likely be high level in the ordinance, and then a lot of the procedure would be established by administrative order.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Purington?
And this may be a question for Karen, if she's available, because I don't know, Gina, I don't know if you know this or not. The state has set THC levels at 35%. It's my understanding. And in talking with our DEA director here, I think even in Colorado, are those percentages not at 8%? And when I talked with our administrator, he said, if you want to lower those percentages from the 35% within the city limits, that would be something that we could do. But I'm not sure if we can go less than what the state allows. I would think we could, we just couldn't go more.
Yes, Councilmember Purington, Mayor and Council, I believe that you can be more restrictive than the state statute. I think that's clearly allowed. I think I'm going to let Karen jump in here. I don't believe that we've had any specific direction with regard to council wanting to do that. So that may be a topic to discuss here briefly. I'm going to let Karen jump in now.
Karen, go ahead.
Councilmember Purington, Mayor, I think that this did actually come up at an earlier meeting because we discussed it at the work session, that I have not found a local jurisdiction who has regulated that at the local level. It's always been done at the state level. It would require, I think, a testing program over and above what what they're doing at the state level. So, for example, and I believe that this was Councilmember Nice's point, if the state is testing flour for 35%, we're not, and we want to cap it here locally at 8%, then we're going to have a sampling and a testing program in order to monitor what is being sold here in the local market. And that is going to be a much larger undertaking. I'm not saying that it's not within the police power of the local jurisdiction. I'm just saying I have not found another local jurisdiction to date that has done that at the local level. And that has not been, I think this is now our 4th work session, and that direction has not been provided thus far from the council.
Follow-up.
Go ahead.
Wasn't there, I'm remembering somewhere, maybe it's just literature that I've read, there was a cap at 8%. And then just to follow up on that is that I thought that the city was looking at doing their own testing anyway and not relying on state labs.
And Council Member Purinton, the testing that the city had mentioned was just to ensure that there was accuracy in the labeling of the products that were in the dispensary, not to test at a different or lower concentrate for a flour. The 8% that you are recalling, I believe, is when we had Mr. Court here, and we talked at our meeting about the fact that the effects of THC on the human body had not been tested in excess of 8%, and therefore it was uncertain as to what percent might possibly be safe or safer for human consumption. And so there really is, I don't believe, the empirical data where we could set it any higher than 8. If there's been no testing on the human body in a manner consistent over 8%, there's no way for this council to say, okay, we think 20% is fine. There's nothing to base that on. I think you would have to set it at 8, or you would have to set it lower than that. I'm not aware of any jurisdiction that has set a THC level that low. It may be out there, and I just haven't come across it yet, but I have not seen it.
Thank you very much. If anybody's keeping track of things to talk about with our legislators at the next sessions, that might be one to add to the list. Councilmember Ronnie and Councilmember Nice.
Thank you. While Karen's on, so we received an email in regard to the Illinois lottery and the lawsuits. So is that, because you've been talking to us about the lawsuits, you've been filling us in and providing us with information about the lawsuits that had happened in Illinois regarding that lottery. So I'm assuming, and I know you've shared this already, but if you could reiterate it, that the staff is taking that into consideration as to what Illinois had done that created those lawsuits to occur and what they did to change it.
I'm not sure, well, let me roll this back. We did discuss the Illinois lawsuit, the lawsuits based on how they had handled their lottery at the last work session. One of the things that Illinois did was they did lotteries within lotteries within lotteries, and they had an issue where they didn't handle the crunching of their data properly, and in order to resolve and fix the inequity there, they had to issue more and additional licenses. One of the things that Illinois did was they tried to come up with a type of a remedial system whereby neighborhoods and communities that had been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, whatever that means, I did not get far down that research path, but they allocated a certain number of their licenses to be distributed to businesses within those communities that had suffered a disproportionate impact from prior drug policies. So one of the huge benefits of a lottery system is that it does tend to be fairly hands-off, fair. We put everybody who qualifies in the hopper and we draw from there. You do run into a bit of a quagmire when you try to have a hybrid system wherein you try to give a leg up or a plus factor based on certain prospects while still having an objective type of lottery system. I know that in Texas, we ran into that issue head on for years with affirmative action in law school admissions. There were plus factors that were given to try to have more diversity within law school ranks. And then that kicked off a bunch of discrimination lawsuits. So I think what Illinois did was admirable in concept and difficult in execution. And then they ended up getting sued over that. We're not contemplating doing anything quite so fancy. We're looking at more of a, do you meet all of the factors that the state and the city of Billings require for their licensees? And if so, you get entered into the lottery and we select from there.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to address what Councilwoman Purinton brought up about the adult use, the THC limits. I think the discussions we've had in the committee have been limited on that. I had some discussions outside with Karen on this, and I think at that one seminar and a couple other council members. But the idea of the fact that another community is not doing it, I don't think is a reason for us to not do it ourselves. I think if we believe and think that there's a limitation in the amount of THCs that should be out there, then I think we should address that. And I want to make sure that people understand that the limits that I've talked about have been regarding adult use, not the medical marijuana side. I don't want to be involved in something that a doctor is prescribing to a patient, but on the adult use side, I think there's some empirical data there that we can rely on and utilize. They limit the amount of alcohol in beer and distilled drinks and things like that, and there's regulations amongst those. I think we can come with some regulations on that if the council here desires to do that. I guess that's the question I'm going to ask the council members is, do you guys agree, or do you want to move forward and give direction to staff on moving forward with some type of THC limits on recreational or adult use products?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So you got one vote. I guess just a general observation without really kind of getting down to it is I'm not used to making big policy decisions like that without some advocates who bring expertise to it. Kind of really feel beyond my depth. It'd be interesting, or I'm a little surprised that there's not some organization or professional group who is out there who would help us with that. That would give me a higher level of confidence. So I'm hesitant just because of that. You know, it's above my pay grade, but I would never say never, put it that way. Council, if anybody wants to comment, feel free.
And just I think the reason I'm advocating for it is because of the, and again, I'm not an expert at this by any means, but the limited amount of data that I've looked at, there is some empirical data that says there is a negative impact on people in that range of 6 to 8%, and that's going to impact our community. And that's why I would say we'd want to see something like that. You know, the amount of THC in marijuana that, and by the way, this does not impact anyone who wants to grow it in their own home. I mean, none of that is impacted by this, but the amount of marijuana that was in, you know, the marijuana back in the 60s and 70s is much different than it is now because they're genetically breeding them to higher concentrations of THC. And so I believe that there's some good data there that we can research, look into, and utilize that data for the adult use side and move forward on that. And again, it would have to be up to the council to direct the staff so they can actually get that data and find it and make sure that it is good data. And maybe they'll come back and say, no, there's not enough data here, we don't do it. But I think we should at least direct them move them in that direction to get that data for us to find out, is it a way that we should go or not?
Thank you, and maybe look specifically at the issue of distillates, because I'm a lot more comfortable with limitations on manufactured products, edibles, which I understand can go up to, 100% concentration potentially, as opposed to the plant product, which has to be a lot more difficult to control. Lots of hands. Councilmember Tricky, Councilmember Shaw.
This is a very, very, very complicated issue. As the mayor just pointed out, there's a difference between how you consume the product and the timing of the use of the product and the education around the use of the product. There are distillates that people just take a single little drop of something. There are, I'm assuming that the percentage things that you guys are talking about is stuff that's consumed by smoking. The 36% number is certainly something like that. The 8% one would have been that number back in the 70s. I will point out that the 36% number has been pretty much what we've seen for the last 20 years. So if there is like a huge difference between the impact on people, I would assume we would have seen it someplace in the literature. So that's just one aspect of it. Which ones do you want to regulate? How do you want to regulate them? And why do we want to regulate them differently than the state, which already has like 20 years of experience of dealing with this stuff? Why would we presume that we bring anything to the table that the state hasn't already thought about or looked at in their 20 years of experience with medical marijuana? So those are two things. And as Ms. Tracy was saying, the one issue that happens across the board here is if we go into putting a new level of regulation into all of this stuff, we're introducing another level of things that we have to hire people to do, make sure it happens, more regulations, and all of that type of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of different things that come into this, and there's no way that I can see moving forward with something like that, where we're going far beyond where the state's saying, without a lot of study and input from experts from across the board, not just from ones that are brought in by the substance abuse community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Shaw, but Councilmember Vogt, something quick?
We have Karen Tracy leave. She's not feeling very...
Oh, Karen, you don't have to stick on with us. We'll give you a shout if we need you. Thank you. Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. Yeah, good discussion. We have had some of this discussion in the subgroup committee. I'm against a THC limit for a number of reasons that I think are pretty practical. One is that it's going to be very expensive for us to implement. Two is that when we look at that map, we have, 29 dispensaries ringing in the city that we have absolutely no control over. So they are going to be able to have whatever the state level is, but we're saying if you're 2 streets over, we're going to severely limit you. So to me, that puts a really undue burden on local Billings businesses and makes it really hard for our local businesses to get off the ground, which I don't think is the goal of the council. So those are my issues with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you. I think if the state had wanted to regulate it, they would have. They gave it to the local jurisdictions and the local municipalities to regulate. So I am open to learning about the different types of percentages before I make a decision, and I take this decision very seriously. I think it's about public safety. I think it's about the health of the community. It's not just about business. It's about the health of children in our community. It's about the health of people in our community, as well as public safety costs. So I'm open to learning. Doesn't mean I'm going to make a decision one way or the other, but I'm certainly open to learning, because this is not an area that I'm willing to just say, okay, I don't know anything about it, but okay, let's go ahead and regulate. I want to learn. So if there's the opportunity to learn, I welcome that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, Council, we still need to open the public hearing, but I want to cut off just questions for staff or other discussion. Councilmember Tricky.
So I have a couple of questions. First, I just wanted to make this in one sentence and make sure that I'm right. The county commissioner's hearing on marijuana regulations for the county is at 2 o'clock on the third floor of the Stillwater Building. Is that correct?
Councilmember Cheriki, Mayor Council, correct. It's their normal Thursday afternoon discussion session, so there'll potentially be other things on that agenda, but that's what they had reached out today and said they were scheduling.
Okay, thank you. Actually, before you sit down, do we have any additional information about where the state is going with their sign regulations, or is that still kind of a black box?
Councilmember Cheriki and Mayor and Council, I don't have a current update. There was some initial proposed administrative rules, and then they got comment, and there was a lot of concern, and then they went back to kind of retool, and I haven't seen yet what the next round is there. We'll check on that again, but I don't have anything tonight for it.
And a follow-up to that, it was my understanding that the 150-foot setback was related to that issue of signage. The thing that we were trying to avoid with the 150-foot setback was a bunch of, like, the casino signs, casino signs, and pot signs. So those two things would be addressing the same issue?
Councilmember Cheriki and Mayor and Council, you're correct that part of the issue for the 150-foot arterial setback was to both sort of prevent a sort of a corridor type situation where you might have multiple of the same businesses lined up one after another, both businesses and, of course, signage with that. So I guess that was sort of the discussion that came out with the working group, and that you had a couple of work sessions ago, was that idea of similar to like the casinos and such, where you end up when there's no restriction on how many can be lined up along an arterial street, then you can have them all in a row with signage. The part that's tricky with the signage at the state level, so we have current signage, brand new signage regulations went through, and those were also reviewed by our consultant who was an attorney regarding the issues with the Supreme Court cases and such about content, regulating content and being careful. So we're comfortable with our regulations from that standpoint. The state is talking about some other different things, and we're trying to make sure that we're balancing that so that if you have to get a state sign permit of some kind, you do that first and then come and we'll apply our code to that, to whatever's proposed.
Thank you. One last question.
Wyeth, I just want to make sure we don't create a false impression, though, that on page 5, your staff report, section B4, the 150-foot setback applies to the occupied building space. Doesn't say anything about signs. So the 150 setback does not apply to signs. It is the building, not the sign. So
it's good. Well, you're right. Again, thank you. Yeah, Mayor and Council. I mean, thank you. Yeah, it's going to depend on where that puts you on a property or multiple properties, and then because there's also issues with off-premise signage. It gets complicated in terms of what would or wouldn't be allowed. But it's going to say your business is back 150 feet, whether if you're on one parcel or you're on a back parcel, and then that's going to affect your signage too.
Thank you, Wyeth. One last question, Mr. Mayor. Has the Billings Police Department or the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office reported any information whatsoever due to an increase of crime that's going on right now here in the Billings or Yellowstone County area related to the fact that marijuana has now been legal since January 1st for adult use?
Councilmember Cheriki, I don't know the answer to that, but I can follow up with Chief St. John tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw. Did we already? Okay, we've already been around that circle and come back. Okay, why don't we open up for public comment, Council? If anybody would like to comment on this item, please come forward. Just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. There's a little timer here you can look at, and just tell us your name and address at the beginning. Oh, yeah, and if there's more than one, feel free to go ahead and create a little line there, and then we'll know how many people want to comment. Go ahead.
All right. Connor Lorenz, 6339 Canyon Woods Drive. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Typically, I prefer to sit back, stay at home, and let you guys make the decisions while I actually just watch your guys' live feed at home. because I truly respect your guys' authority and the fact that, our community voted you guys into your position, I tend to stay back. But I do want to stop in tonight and point out what I believe to be a flaw in this proposed cap lottery system. And keep in mind, this does suck for me because of the fact that I have so many friends that own and work for smaller dispensaries that are probably going to be upset with me for this, so I do apologize to them in advance, but I think that emotion has been one of the biggest downfalls for the cannabis industry in Billings on both sides of this. I feel like too much emotion has been put into this, and if the city wants to tax this as a business, it needs to be treated as a business. Just from watching your guys' previous meetings, I think that you guys are looking past a super key factor in capping the city licenses. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with the cap, but I do think that giving the smaller shops the same equal opportunity as the much larger shops is not good business for the city. It's pretty clear to me, being in the industry, that the majority of open dispensaries would no doubt struggle with maintaining an appropriate inventory that keeps up with the needed recreational demand. Giving favor to the largest current dispensaries helps ensure the longest possible lasting inventory, which also in turn means that the city would be able to maximize its tax potential. Having these smaller shops in town will not only limit what the city is able to tax, and will not help the demand that the city will need to cover once we open up for rec sales. I hate to say it, but I truly think that the smaller dispensaries will struggle with maintaining appropriate inventory, even in the county on their own with recreational marijuana. Being located in the city is only going to bring more traffic, which leads to them running out even sooner. Now, the cannabis industry in Montana is much different than the liquor industry. Liquor can be shipped in from anywhere, basically, while cannabis all has to be sourced here in state. This heavily limits the opportunity for these shops to keep up with inventory, because we all know that most dispensaries actually do plan on focusing their inventory on retail sales rather than wholesale. I think another key point here is that bigger shops typically have more staff, giving them the ability, to designate more personnel towards compliance and safety. In my opinion, this will ultimately lower costs for the city with regulations and enforcement. The dispensary that I work for is actually developing a program to help educate our customers and patients on how to properly use cannabis and not abuse it. We have created pamphlets to begin and plan on continuing to offer educational material to help both break the stigma and also help with safe consumption in our city. Every single one of my staff members is required to attend a cannabis class that helps them understand the medicinal properties, safety, Montana law, as well as help them answer any questions that consumers may have. Between those 2 points alone, you guys, I'd say it's a pretty clear business decision for the city. And I think that giving all of those 29 dispensaries an equal opportunity is actually, in a way, unfair, mainly towards those of us that have put in much more time and money and are currently catering to many more people than the smaller dispensaries. Thank you all for your consideration and time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next.
Of course not with me. That's you though.
Tina Walker-Smith, 4100 Murphy. Mayor and Council, I wanted to begin with an apology. I've been attending and speaking with the goal of fighting for our industry, but I realize what we need to do is work together. That is my real goal, as I said 2 weeks ago. We just want to be heard and have decisions made based on correct information, not fear of old issues, which were proven long ago not to be true. I apologize for being combative, and although I will still correct incorrect information that I hear, hopefully we can all agree just to work together. There's a huge opportunity here, and together we can do what's best for the industry and for the city. Today, I only have 2 questions, which will hopefully be answered at some point. The first one, what is the reasoning behind allowing a transporter license only within the limited 3 proposed zones? There's no sales out of a transporter license, so they have no need for a sign, and there is no general or public traffic. Excuse me. I don't see the benefit of a transporter license being in the very limited area as of the dispensary's manufacturing and cultivation locations. Number 2, how was a license for a testing facility already granted for a downtown address when the city was not giving business licenses to marijuana businesses at the time, and now there's a 90-day moratorium? It has raised the question of favoritism towards that specific license owner. I look forward to the open meeting agreed to by the council and for us working together for the best decisions for all. And for that map, can I email a request to get a copy of that map later? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, you don't have to answer right now, but before we adjourn, if you can kind of think about who can best answer those 2 questions, we'd appreciate it. Is there any other public comment on this item number 4? Any other public comment on item number 4, the marijuana regulation update? If not, I'm going to close the public comment period. Nobody is rushing the podium, so, okay. Public comment period is closed. Thank you very much. Council, there's no specific decisions to be made, but additional comment, then we'll want to come back to those questions if we can. Councilmember Puritan?
I'm just trying to understand what the first gentleman even was asking for. It sounded to me like he didn't want any of the small businesses.
I imagine he works for a larger, more established dispensary.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood. Thank you.
That is definitely not my understanding.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
My understanding.
Discussion then.
My understanding of what he's saying is that if there's, say, 30 different organizations that apply, and 3 of them are larger, and the other 27 of them are mom and pops, then the chances, and then we do a lottery system, what happens with the lottery system is that every one of those businesses has an equal chance to get the license. And what that means for the economics of the industry and for the city is that the larger businesses are also the ones that are most likely to succeed, and they're also the ones that have already put a larger investment into their businesses. So he's making the argument that it's not a simple lottery with big and small ones in there is not necessarily fair to the big ones.
Gotcha.
Yep. I saw another hand down. Councilmember Yakwich.
Well, I would like to direct staff to look a little bit more into the potency and get a little bit more information on it.
I'll second that.
Okay, we can just put that to a motion. There was a motion. Did you put it in that form?
My motion, Your Honor.
Okay, and there was a second. Not a lot of flesh, but I guess in the discretion of the staff to continue to investigate that issue. So discussion now on that motion to direct staff in that way. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This motion is not specific enough for me to really figure out whether that is something that down the road I would support. So if we have put 500 hours into coming forward with the Stillwater Building, I can't imagine how many hours we've already put into this. And that does not mean that I don't think the hours put into this aren't important. They are very important. This is a very important issue. This is a very important regulation that we need to understand and do as well as we can to regulate. At the same time, I also consider that looking at the map, how far would someone have to drive in order to get something of a different potency? So if you're going to regulate city businesses at a different level of potency, as a customer, that supposed customer out there, how hard would it be for them to make a different choice in potency? So would we be actually regulating our business to the point where, as Councilmember Shaw said, you're getting overly burdensome to the point, could they actually survive under that regulatory scheme? And I think that's a very important question to ask. In terms of safety, if we look at it in terms of safety, zero data. I mean, I heard the mention from the man who came in from Colorado, but in terms of the basis of our decision, I'm not sure where we're at in terms of a justification for a different potency. And thirdly, if no other municipality that Ms. Tracy has worked on has gone forward at that level, how much risk do we have on the basis of a lawsuit? And I'm not saying that a lawsuit is a reason to do something or not to do something. I'm saying that is also what I think should be a part of our calculation. And most importantly, what's our outcome? What is it we're trying to do? So I don't think I'm going to support the motion, not because I don't think there are important things that need to be addressed. Second of all, I think I'll be outvoted, so it won't matter at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess I'll support the motion. I think we all know it's very uncertain whether this is going to go anyplace, but I do think it would at least I trust staff to take an initial look, tell us if there might be some options, or whether we should just move on. But it is a big issue and some additional level of investigation. We could then, with that information, potentially go to the county to address the very real question of what happens when you have this inconsistency, and also maybe use it for lobbying with the legislature in the next session. All of that could be useful information. But I would agree, we don't want staff to invest hundreds of hours at this stage, but whatever the next step would be. Other comments? Councilmember Tricky.
Two things. One, staff has already addressed this. Ms. Tracy referred to when she talked about the potency thing and stuff like that. That was something she found out as a result of looking at this question before at our guidance. And I would also say that if you look at the state regulations, you will see that the state does regulate quality, quantity, and potency. So if staff does do anything on this because we pass this motion, the very first thing I would recommend to staff to do is to come back with an expert from the state or perhaps one of the people here who are involved in the industry to tell us exactly what is currently being regulated in terms of quantity, quality, and potency. Because it does exist. We've been told this before in this room, and we just choose to ignore the issue because we want to regulate them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion before there's a vote on this? Councilmember Tricky.
Well, yeah.
What did I?
He never wears. He's having a bad day.
I think it'd be good for your personality.
And I guess I agree that I don't have enough information to make any decision. I would like a 30,000-foot level version rather than drilling down for 500 hours. So, I mean, give me some 1, 2, 3, just some bullet points to make some decision. And I agree that I don't know what the state's requiring and whatnot, but let's not go down so far that we spend a lot of time on it. But yes, we need to know what we're going to vote on.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else before we move to a vote? Don't see anything. So I hope everybody understands the motion. Don't see any asks for clarification. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
I believe the ayes have it. So council or staff, let's. I do want to come back to these two questions, but Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Kevin, how far along are we on the meeting that we were going to have with the different dispensaries that are currently operating in the city and/or county?
Yeah, I know City Administrator Kukulski talked with me about that last week, but I don't think we've got anything firmly scheduled at this point, but it's in the works. Obviously, it's going to have to be within the next, 10 days or something of that nature. So. Okay,
I just want to make sure that's still confirmed we're going to do that.
Okay, I'm sorry, what, go ahead.
Yes, I spoke with Mr. Kukulski about that, and I'm unable to access my calendar right now, but we did come up with a tentative date and have reserved the library, but I'm not sure. He hasn't advertised anything yet, so I'm not sure if something came up with his schedule, but it was planned for next week.
Oh, okay, all right.
I just can't remember the date, and I can't get on my calendar right now for some reason.
Okay, thank you. Just quite frankly, earlier the information, the better. My schedule certainly fills up really fast, and I think it's important that city council members are there to hear and listen, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm going to ask the council member this question. I talked to Wyatt earlier about during the meeting about the being 1,000-foot with the county. Do you guys want to see the map if they include the county residential zones and what that map would look like, so we know how restrictive we're going to be or what kind of potential problems we have in the future? Is that something that the council is interested in seeing?
It only matters what the county commissioners do from that perspective.
Councilor Shaw, can you go ahead and...
I was just saying it only matters from my perspective, what the county commissioners do. If they decide to do nothing, I really don't, I guess I'm saying it kind of is a moot point to me. But if on Thursday so I would say for me it hinges on the Thursday meeting with the county.
I see. Yeah, the reason I'm concerned about that is because if some of that land does come into the city, we're going to be creating problems, and I'd like to see us avoid that. Plus, looking at that map, we may find maybe 1,000 is too far. Maybe it needs to go to 600 or 800 or whatever it may be, and that would open up some additional land. So I don't know why, if that's an easy thing to do for you, if you punch in 1,000, it just populates, or if you actually have to manually draw the lines. But those are the kind of things, I don't know how interactive that map is that you can do that.
Councilmember Nisi, Mayor and Council, I don't know exactly. I know some of this takes some work on the GIS's part, so we'd have to check and see what that would involve. I think if we're just dealing with the residential zoning like we are in the city, it's probably not super challenging, but it would take a little work to do that. But we can certainly at least check on that, and certainly, yeah, after we hear in a couple of days what else the county may want to do, then we'll be looking at that too.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Joy?
Thank you. I wouldn't support that direction simply because the city and the county chose to separate their zoning from the city because they didn't want our regulations. So I wouldn't think that there's sufficient support among the commissioners to move forward with something that would entangle them back into our zoning regulations. So I won't support that. Thank you.
Councilor Tricky? And then I'll ask staff to address those two questions of the reasoning for the transportation license, limiting that to those 3 zones, given that they generate limited traffic and signs. And then second, there was this other, was it a testing license granted and the circumstances for that? So those were the 2 questions. We can get those clarified too at that point. But Councilmember Tricky?
Very early on in this process, we had asked staff to provide rationale and data in order to support our doing these types of zoning and licensing regulations above and beyond what we're seeing in any other businesses. Can I assume that we have, and I know that Ms. Tracy sent us some stuff, can I assume that that's all that we're going to be getting on that topic?
I'm sorry, on which topic are you referring to?
So basically we're sitting here and we're setting up zoning requirements that are more restrictive than, say, for alcohol and gambling. And we had asked for a rationale to support why we were doing that. And Ms. Tracy sent us, I believe, 4 articles that she thought supported those.
Yes, I believe that's all that's forthcoming at this point. If Karen wants to jump in to supplement that, because I honestly don't recall how many different things she sent and which applies to which issue, so it might be better if Karen addresses that. I think she's coming.
That was addressed in the zoning, the articles about the increase of marijuana consumption when you lived 0.8 miles from a retail dispensary. That was referenced in one of the very first staff memos. There's an increase at 18.4 miles of living within a dispensary, and then it goes up even more at 0.8.
I don't really need you to go into the details, Karen. I just wanted to be sure that was what we got is what we're going to get.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
Gina, go
Mayor,
ahead.
I apologize. Mr. Friday just advised that there was some additional information on that issue attached to the zoning commission, the stuff that was sent to the zoning commission.
I'm sorry, my phone beeped at me, and it goes into my hearing aid. So
Gotcha. Mr. Friday just advised that there's additional information on that particular issue attached to the zoning commission report, the information submitted to the zoning commission.
Mayor and Council, so there's some more material. What Karen has referenced is provided, and then also there's some material that we've also attached that discusses the zoning piece, I guess, a little more specifically, that is going to the zoning commission that then will also continue on to you after it goes through their process. There are some references to some different articles.
Thank you.
And more generally on that topic, I've sent an email to staff, and I don't know if I copied the rest of the council, but suggesting that at the time that the council goes to a vote on any of these regulations, that these various articles that we've received, pro, con, neutral, whatever, be somehow made part of that record at that time with a bibliography, links, because we've received it by dribbles and drabs over a number of different meetings, and I think it'd be helpful to, certainly in any court challenge or any review of this, that they be consolidated into one place. So hopefully council or staff will do that. That would at least would be my recommendation. Staff, do we have a volunteer to take the first question dealing with the basis for the zoning regulations involving the transportation businesses? Wyeth?
Yes, Mayor and Council. So the reason that the transporter license or the transporter businesses are included only in the three districts like the others is that the transporting also includes storage. So you've got, and there's a definition, and I'm referencing the zoning ordinance, so I don't want to get too far off track here, but it's on page 6 of the zoning or the draft zoning ordinance. We have some discussion of language being added to the industrial wholesale and storage section, and it talks about transport and storage. Marijuana transporters are allowed to store in transit shipments of marijuana for short periods of time not to exceed 30 days. Products may be temporarily stored either in secured vehicles, trailers, or within an enclosed structure or warehouse. So I think that our understanding with the working group and this conversation was that if it's not just kind of the Uber thing where I drive and get the food and go right away, I could have a whole bunch of marijuana that I'm moving around to different places that I have and I'm storing temporarily. So that use then becomes a little more significant where it's located, because suddenly now I'm storing the stuff that I'm transporting, not just driving, and then I go home and I don't have any of the material with me. So that was partly why the idea was to keep it in those 3 districts, because of that aspect.
Thank you very much. And the second question dealing with this other license, is anybody familiar with the details there that want to comment?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, we're not aware of anything, and Andy was trying to look it up as we were, the question was asked. So if we could get, a name, location, anything of that nature, we'll investigate a little further. But right now, we don't have any information on that.
Okay, so Ms. Smith, if you want to follow up with staff maybe on that specifically, they can be more helpful. Okay, we've had public comment, we've had discussion, staff's moving ahead with this. Are we done with item number 4? Looks like we are. Thank you very much. Council, move then to items of general council discussion before public comment on anything that wasn't on our agenda tonight. Any items of general council discussion? Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to zoning and, code enforcement. Nicole Cromwell a couple weeks ago gave us a presentation on the Dirty Dozen, and one of the properties that Councilmember Yakowicz and I have really been hammering down on and met with Judge Kolar on and have talked with code enforcement with and this is a property that was on the Dirty Dozen and had come before the court over and over and over again. And just really want to give a shout out to code enforcement. That building was demolished a week ago. It is gone. And really, really, really want to compliment code enforcement's hard work on that. And just also share that it was one of the really bad properties in our city that drew crime to it, and really violent crime. And so truly appreciate code enforcement and remind people that when we talk about the public safety mill levy and we talk about public safety, that it's not just police, but it's also the efforts of code enforcement and our court system, and how many resources go into these landlord properties that are not good investments in our city, and they have opportunity to become better investments in our city and better partners with the city. So again, thank you to code enforcement and Nicole and her hard work and all of the other code enforcement officers. So, and that was Battleship, just putting it out there. It was the Battleship Apartments on the south side. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any other items? Councilmember Purington?
This is more of an announcement than discussion, but I noticed this evening on Fox News on the 5, they have this one ending thing, it's called One More Things, and one of the gentlemen presented Ryan Benton, who's one of our firefighters, who they captured a photo of him in a traffic accident, I think it was a couple of nights ago. It was on Instagram, which I'm not on. But anyway, he was reading a book to a little girl, I think she was 3 years old, that was involved in the car accident. And they were just doing a shout out to the Billings Fire Department, so I just wanted to shout out to the Billings Fire Department and said, he made national news.
Very good. I won't make snide comments about what the police department might say about the fire department's ability to read, but we do appreciate it.
It was a big picture book. So.
Oh boy, they're gonna get you at the next softball game. No, thank you. We really appreciate our firefighters and even the Billings Police Department. Despite that, thank you very much. Councilmember Yakovich.
Well, just as council, we'll be working together for the volunteer appreciation dinner. So if anyone is out there on a board of the city, we just want to remind them, try to RSVP by October 7th. And it will be Thursday, October 14th at 6 p.m. at the Billings Community Center. We're hosting all the volunteers working on various commissions and committees of the city, and we're providing them Tiny's barbecue chicken and ribs, and keynote speaker will be the mayor, and the host entertainment will be the amazing Brento, who is now committed to a 20-minute magic show. So I'm going because of that. But we are really grateful for all those who volunteer, and as a council and mayor, we want to extend our appreciation to them.
The mayor from where?
Laurel, hopefully. And I hear the amazing Brento will be sawing the deputy mayor in half using a real saw.
Well, and spouses are welcome to come. We just want to have them RSVP as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
And flower, we have door prizes too for those great volunteers.
Lots of prizes. We appreciate our board commission volunteers. Anything else before we move to public comment on non-agenda items? Don't see any. So if anybody's in the audience would like to comment on anything that was not on our agenda tonight, please come forward. Again, we'll ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Catherine Card, 2815 4th Avenue South, Mayor and Council. For some 8 months, I have been writing and speaking in person to the Billings Police Department and to you about the encounter that I had in last December, with an element of this community that I have not previously had any encounter with, not even thought about, and that is the outlaw motorcycle gangs, specifically the motorcycle gang Galloping Goose. I've identified the dangers this group and others like it pose to the health and honesty and the safety of our community. I've said this over and over again. And I've questioned the relationship between the gang and the Billings Police Department. And I've provided you evidence of a favored status given to the motorcycle clubs, including motorcycle gangs like the Galloping Goose, by the Billings Police Department. such that for years the police department has disregarded the city law, city ordinances, in order to approve events such as the Road Dog Toy Run and other runs and memorial rides through our city streets. I also have given you evidence of ties between the Galloping Goose and the local law enforcement, and I've spoken and I've written much. And what has been your response? Aside from a few emails and phone calls and a couple of personal visits and one meeting, hinting that something will be done, or that you'll be taking my complaints and information seriously, there's really been a lot of silence. Where does your silence to all this come from? Where's your silence coming from to all I've asserted, all the questions I've posed to you? If the Billings Police Department's culture, or part of it, is one of skirting the law, skirting policing standards and policies and procedures, what good will more money do? If there is in fact a corruption within the Billings Police Department, how will throwing more money at that department help? It's like the Stillwater Building and its asbestos and other problems. Sometimes you just have to expose it. Sometimes you have to dig it out before it will be functional, before it will be healthy. And I believe that's a scenario that's needed with the police department from my experiences. Thank you for considering again what I say. And I do have a public safety mill levy sign in my yard, but that is with hope that you will take me seriously after 9 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kevin, I'm just going to ask you, I remember there was an issue of the permitting process for the toy run, and as a result of Ms. Card's concerns, I believe we were going to try to make sure that there were some changes there, but I'm not sure to what extent that's been communicated or hasn't been communicated to the council, to Catherine Card, to the rest of the public. Can you comment on that element of all of this?
Thanks, Mayor and Council. City Administrator Kukulski and myself did meet with Mrs. Card back in August 26th, I believe, for well over an hour to listen to her concerns. And yes, in regards to the actual permitting process, yes, that was one issue that we're going to rectify with the police department, that the toy run will require to get a permit, which I think they've already filed for and done that for this year, along with some other entities in town that, have just failed to get permits or weren't aware that they had to. So we're going to try to remedy those situations and correct that going forward from this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Running?
Thank you. I just would like to just share that it's not been silence. The silence has been where we have offered respect at the council meetings. I have addressed the policy issue repeatedly with Mrs. Card and with the chief of police, who answered right away and corrected that situation right away, and that has been communicated multiple times to Mrs. Card by myself privately, as well as in emails. And so the silence has been where we have stayed respectful here at city council meetings, but numerous of us have responded to her multiple times. So I just want to share that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, council, and no other public comments on non-agenda items, no one else is coming to the podium. So we'll close that element and our meeting, and we are adjourned. Thank you.